All right, the April 28th, 2020 meeting of the Yarmouth Board of Selectmen is about to be convened. As a precautionary measure to reduce the spread of coronavirus, all town buildings are closed to the public. Therefore, this meeting will be held by remote participation. My name is Michael Stone, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen. I will begin by seeking a motion to conduct this meeting via remote participation and to take a roll call for quorum.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Tracy,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Norm,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. In addition, the town administrator, Daniel Knappich, and acting assistant town administrator, Rich Bienvenu, are present in this meeting. Rich Bienvenu will act as the host for this remote meeting. The meeting is now open. Pursuant to, these are instructions for remote participation. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 18, in the Governor's March 23rd, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Yarmouth Board of Selectmen is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access and participate in the proceedings as provided for in the order. Persons who would like to view this meeting while in progress may do so by watching this virtual meeting or the live via the town's YouTube channel. We will also post a recording of this meeting on the Town of Yarmouth website as soon as we are able. Please be patient as we work to overcome any technical challenges with the virtual meeting. To reduce confusion during the meeting, all participants of the virtual meeting are muted by the host. As participants are called upon to speak, they will be unmuted. Members of the public attending or viewing this meeting virtually will be able to use the raise hand button to identify themselves to the chair when called upon. The host will then unmute your audio. If you are dialed into the phone number provided, you can press *9 on your phone to indicate that you would like to speak. Please wait for the chairman to recognize you before speaking. In addition, public comments may be submitted via email to publiccomment@yarmouth.ma.us. This account will be monitored during the meeting by the host and provided to the chairman as applicable. If you are called upon to speak during the meeting, please consider the following guidelines. Do not use speakerphones. Do not use Bluetooth devices. Mute all background noises. Clearly state your name each and every time prior to speaking. All votes must be by roll call. After a motion is made and there is a second, the chair will take the roll call vote. All motions, decisions, documents, and letters will be verbally read into the record. If it appears the meeting cannot or should not proceed, then the host will recommend that the chair requests to continue the hearing to a later date and time and/or until public meeting can resume normally. Okay, we will begin this meeting as we begin all of our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll start with public comment. Is there anybody out there that would like to be heard?
Mr. Chairman, I checked our email, public comment at yarmouth.ma.us, and there's no comment there. We do have a couple members of the public, Mr. Thomas Sullivan and Ms. Vita Morris, if you'd like to recognize them.
Okay, who do we have first?
This will be Vita.
Hey, Vita, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly. What would you like to say?
I understand that wastewater is on the agenda tonight, and that it's actually an article in the warrant already. Is that correct, for the meeting to be now held in June, I guess, the town meeting?
My understanding is that the likely scenario is that all of the wastewater articles will probably be put over until the fall meeting.
Okay, that's what I was hoping that would happen, so I'm happy to hear that. Also, I only heard snippets on a radio report, about a week or 2 weeks ago, about the drive-in project, and very specifically a bike path that was being proposed in that project, to which I guess the Cape Cod Commission reacted. Am I correct? Hello?
Yeah, hello. I don't have any specific information on that, so we'll have to get back to you on that.
Well, let me just make a comment. If that's the case, apparently the Cape Cod Commission didn't think it was a very good idea to try and put a bike lane on Route 28. If this bike path starts at Bayberry and goes down the winding West Yarmouth Road, which isn't exactly a very wide road to begin with, also, I don't understand why would something like that go past anywhere, especially the Board of Selectmen, if this was already brought before you. And then you have to have an outside entity tell you that this is not a very good idea.
It was not.
I just hope that will be taken up and dropped as fast as possible.
We received funding from the commission to investigate a pathway connection between the present rail trail and the site on Route 28. That'll be a subject of a future board meeting.
I thought that they were somebody already investigated and presented something to the commission, and they were commenting. I must have misunderstood, because this is not an acceptable. I can't imagine going down West Yarmouth Road, creating a bike lane there, and I can't imagine what the price would be to begin with, and just to have something like that with bicyclists meandering on a road that is kind of winding anyway, I just think that that's something that should be dropped as fast as possible. Thank you. That's all I have for today.
Thank you, Vita.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have Tom Sullivan?
Here we do, hang on. Okay, Tom Sullivan is unmuted.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, greetings. Hope everybody's healthy. Couple of things I'd like to address, and it's regards to this virus. Last week, I happened to notice that the gates to the Old Town House Park were actually padlocked. Now today, I was out and the lower parking lot, the entrance at the Bayberry Golf Course, well, people go park their cars to walk the bike path. They got orange barrels on there now, blocking it off. Why all of a sudden this is happening now? All right. Is the bike path blocked off on Station Ave? I haven't had a chance to get down there to take a look. Is the entrance to that also blocked off? Why is this happening? I'd like to have the Board of Health and the rest of the board sit in on this, because I think it's a stretch.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Bruce is on. Bruce, did you hear his question?
Am
Bruce,
I
Murphy,
on?
Bruce, you're unmuted.
Bruce, did you hear
Yes,
Tom's question as to why suddenly I guess the entrance, he said, to Old Townhouse Park and the entranceway to the bike path on Station Avenue are blocked off?
Yes, I can speak to that now or when we give the update later, but I can touch base with it a little bit right now.
Okay, go ahead.
The bike path on Station Ave is open. That lot has not been touched. Into Bayberry, the lower lot and going into Bayberry, when cars were parked there, people were getting out and golfing. I had drove in myself and I did see at least two people coming off the course with their golf clubs. Yes, the area is also used for walking the trails, but it was also being used as for golfing. And we know golfing has been closed for over a month as a
Open up the golf.
non-essential activity. You know, the Old Townhouse Park was an area that had mass gatherings of people, whether it was around the basketball area or in the park when there'd be 15 or 16 cars or more in there. It was difficult to enforce, and for safety measures and protect the public, they were closed. I think we also have to need to keep in mind that we're still under a governor's advisory of stay at home. That, you know, these areas do not need to have people out there at this particular time.
For fixing small passenger vessels. The duck boat likely would not have sunk. Foxhole in Dallas.
All right, is there anybody else on public comment?
Rain and some damaging hail to parts of North Texas.
I have a question.
There's say baseball-sized hail.
What is the back noise? Somebody's radio?
I don't know.
Are we going to have further discussion on this in the agenda item at 6:15?
There's further discussion on this topic.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we'll move on then, if there's no more public comment, to the 6:15 item, COVID-19 updates, which are, there's three.
Yeah,
There's
you blocked it off
fiscal
because we
budget,
saw golf is playing
fiscal
golf.
budget, and annual town election update.
So everybody has to suffer because of a few stupid.
Mr. Chairman, I've asked Mr. Murphy and Dr. Bosky to be on the call on the meeting today to give you an update. There was a Board of Health meeting last night as well, and they had an update on a regulation, but also to give you some updated information on that was just talked about, and also on our testing status on the Cape and in town in general.
Okay, we have Bruce on here. I don't see Dr. Bosky, but we do have a telephone connection coming in. Maybe that's him, I don't know.
Yeah, Dr. Bosky said he was going to call in, so I think, Rich, if you could check that, please.
Okay, Rich said that's not him, but we'll get to him. We'll start with fiscal 20 budget impact.
What I wanted to do is go over the information on the summary report that I sent to you yesterday and indicate an update as it relates to a few things I think that are important to note. The Make Your Own Face Covering Program has been really well received in town, and there's over 360 of these face masks have been delivered to the senior center. And that, coupled with the rollout of our Community Development Block Grant Program for business assistance, that was approved by HUD recently, and we'll start advertising for that as well. And just in general, the efforts that the town is beginning to make preparations for. We don't know what the future looks like. As you know by now, the governor's order was extended to May 18th. A number of questions were asked in a statewide conference call today about further guidance on summer programs, recreation, and whatnot. The administration indicated that we should see something or associated with summer camps, school camps, and things of that nature within the next couple of weeks. They have a task force working on that. And also for next week, it's not available for tonight, but I'll send you some information. There's a advisory that's being passed around by the legislative delegation that was generated associated with the upcoming tourist season. So as you know, through May 18th, we can't take any tourist reservations at any hotels, motels, or Airbnbs or any rentals or anything like that. But also with people coming to the Cape en masse, many from the tri-state area, there have been folks that wanted to make sure that the Cape had an opportunity, that the towns in the Cape had an opportunity to review a guidance document that's going to be generated. So I'll get that out to you. That came to me late today, and it'll be a subject for discussion at next week's meeting.
So is this prohibition on reservations through the 18th
Right
or
now, it's through the 18th. That's correct.
just up to that point in time? So people can take reservations beyond that date right now?
I believe they still can at their own peril. That's correct.
Right,
Yeah.
because we don't, obviously know what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
All right,
Because the health department's update, I just kind of wanted to get that out of the way before we get into the budget related issues, if that's possible. I don't see Dr. Bosky though. Bruce, are you able to go ahead with that?
Yes, I do know we were both getting online at the same time. We were having trouble watching it. We can't see you, but I can listen, and we're both getting on at the same time. So yes, I can go forward. If Rich has the slides, the graph and the slides ready to go, he can just tell me which one's up, and I can explain them as we go.
Okay, Rich, are you able to do that?
Yeah, I'll share the slides. Bruce, which one in particular did you like to start with?
I'd like to start with the county one that shows the total number of positive cases within Barnstable County.
You're up.
Okay. You can see that one from the county. That's showing it's probably up to about 772 positive cases within the county. And you can see that it's a straight increase that has not leveled off yet, that we're still on the increase of positive cases on the Cape. And once it starts leveling off and then going down, I think that's what we're all waiting for. But as of now, you can see from the county, it's still going up.
Can I ask a question about that slide?
Yes, this slide here is prepared by the county health department.
But these are all positives. These aren't just what are active cases currently, correct? Are they active cases?
Correct. No, these are current. No, these are all positive cases that have come through
So
on the Cape.
the number's always going to go up then. I mean, it's not like it's
Correct, it will always go up, but it will start leveling off. Right now, you can see
It'll
it's
never
going up at
level off.
a steep rate.
It's mathematically impossible to level off.
said before.
It'll never level off. I mean, this chart is misrepresentative of a trend since it shows cumulative. It'll never level. It'll always go up.
correct.
It's a misrepresentation. Very poor.
Well, let's take a look at the next graph. What's the next graph you have, Rich?
Bruce?
No.
Do you have the health department graph?
We just had the health department graph up on the screen.
Yes.
Everybody saw it. And Norm Holcomb's comment was that the graph is, it doesn't really depict the reality of the coronavirus, because as long as you get 80 cases at all, it's going to go up. It's never going to.
Rich, do you have the next?
As long as there's
Right.
one case, it's going to keep incrementally increasing. That was his comment.
understood. Do you have the next graph, Rich?
This is
What would
Hillary.
you like,
I was
Bruce?
just unmuted. Can someone hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Hillard.
Okay. It looks like the host just unmuted me. I've been on for the whole meeting, just so you know. Can we go to the graph that shows the COVID-19 positive cases in Yarmouth?
Okay, Rich is working on that. The only graph we've had thus far is the county one. Rich is looking for the Yarmouth one.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not able to-
Yarmouth one is up now.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm not able to see the screen. We weren't able to get on here. So,
Okay, here's
describe what's in-
the,
It shows
no,
62 cases
this is,
as of the 26th of April.
right, and the one, the graph is up now is the, Hillard is the one that just shows the 62 Yarmouth cases that we've had. This is dated 4/26. The Yarmouth first case was March 11th. Just shows you the number of cases, and then as it took off more towards the end of March, it just shows you that the number of total cases that we have going up. Rich, do you have the one that shows the next one? It says weekly cases.
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Okay, that graph is up and says Yarmouth COVID-19 positive cases. It has blue bar graphs with a wavy red line running through it.
Yes.
Okay.
That's the graph that you put together, Hillard, that shows the total number of cases that we have by week with your trailing average. If you want to just explain that graph.
Yeah, as I recall, once again, I don't have it in front of me, that the bars show the number of cases on specific days. So that the bars can give you a sense of what's happening on a day-to-day basis. As you can see, they range from 0 to 5. I think there were 2 days that we had 5. To sort of not be distracted by all the daily fluctuations, I had created a sort of a trailing 7-day average. So every 7 days, the previous 7 days are average. And that's probably, as I recall, a orange or red line on it. And so there should be a smoother look at the cases and what we're seeing, the positive cases. And they've been pretty stable. Certainly we had to get off, start out, our first case was on the 11th. The beginning of the graph may look a little funny only because there's no red line there, and that's because we had to wait for 7 days until the 18th to have something to average. But it gives you a sense of what's happening here. We're doing pretty well. Things have been pretty stable for a month and quite low. Generally, on average, we probably are seeing 2 cases a day or so. And so that gives you a sense of what's happening in Yarmouth. So this is one town. That's all this is, and this doesn't reflect hospitalizations or ICU admissions. There's nothing about deaths on there, but it does show what's happening over the last month or so.
Okay. Rich, do you have the one chart that has the case by case and incident rate?
By town? Bruce, by town?
Yes? Can you hear me?
Yeah, that one's
I can hear you, Bruce.
the graph, it's not a graph, the list by
Oh, there we,
town.
yeah, yes. This chart, these numbers are provided by the State Department of Public Health. 2 weeks ago when they started, April 14th, they released a town by town rate of number of cases. What I did is broke that out towards the 15 towns on the Cape, the number of positive cases, that you can see on the left. And then what the state also did is, besides releasing the number of cases for each town within the Commonwealth, is based it on an incident rate of what the town's population is, and planned on an incident rate per 100,000 to come up with a rate, incident rate. And you can see Provincetown, even though they had a smaller number based on their populations, they had a higher incident rate. So back on April 14th, Yarmouth had 42 positive cases with an incident rate of 174. And then when it came out last week, Wednesday, April 22nd, the number of positive cases were not clear for Provincetown because they had the same number. And Brewster, they had 64, but we knew there was more than that because they had 60 in a nursing home. And they said they had about 70 altogether townwide. But Bourne had 99 cases. You can see the number of cases in each town, and then the incident rate on the far column under rate. And Yarmouth, with 52 cases on April 22nd, had a rate of 216. So at that time, we were the sixth lowest incident rate on the Cape Towns on the 14th, and we moved down to the fifth lowest incident rate on the 22nd. So that gives you an idea how you can compare some towns to each other towns. I think you also have, leaving this chart up there, Rich, there's also Cape Cod Healthcare has come up with a heat index map. I know you talked about that. I think at the last Selectmen meeting, you had looked at it, and that goes by zip code, and it will show areas that have high incidence. And when you look at that area, that map that was provided by the Cape Cod Healthcare, it breaks it up into regions: Upper Cape, Mid Cape, and Lower Cape. And when they looked at that by zip code, Yarmouth also again had the lowest incidence between the towns in the Upper Cape and Mid Cape area. So this just kind of gives you an idea where Yarmouth fits townwide when you're trying to compare, town to town, how things are going. I think our incident rates is low, and I'm contributing some of that to early Board of Health action. At this time, I think it's showing that some of the early actions are paying off a little bit. I think the stay-at-home advisory by the governor is important. And then I think the mask regulation that the board adopted last night was important also, and Chairman Hillard might want to discuss that point at this time.
Yeah, this is really certainly in service to the people working inside these essential businesses who are really on the front lines. That's how I personally see it. I think the Board of Health does as well. These are the individuals who are interacting with people and certainly at risk for an infection. So I think it's helping in that there are some stores reported that some employees did not have masks on. And so it's trying to see that 100% of the employees in these essential businesses are wearing masks. And I'm optimistic that we'll get to 100%. If you go into one of these businesses, people working there will have masks on. In addition, as part of that order, we really ordered the store owners to post a sign at the front door, basically with, it's really, it's a request or it's advised that you are wearing a mask if you're walking into this business, essentially. So it's a recommendation to wear a face covering. Someone doesn't need to have a mask on. They could have a scarf on, something covering their nose and mouth. And hopefully that'll have people thinking before they go through the door without something on. And hopefully they come back next time, they will put something over their face and come in. So we're looking at compliance. That's what you're trying to do. Masks and facial coverings, the goal is really to prevent you from infecting other people. That's how those work.
I'd like to say at this time, the community mask program was a program that the Board of Health came up with a couple of weeks ago to try to get mask helping within the community. People wanted to know what they could do. We came up with the program that people could help make masks, and the idea was the mask could be given to people that are in home in isolation or quarantine. Family members to try to protect them, that we would provide them with a mask if they didn't have a mask available. And after that, people that were elderly or with medical conditions or healthcare workers that needed a mask, that we would be able to offer them within the town. The Board of Health partnered with the senior center, Diane up at the senior center, and just had the program going that way. We do have a person that's helping coordinating us with the Board of Health that has reached out to the community with people making masks that have called in. We've provided supplies to them. We've provided the elastic for, we had somebody donate 200 feet of elastic for the ear loops. And that's going good. As Dan said, the town administrator said, over 360 have been brought to the senior to be distributed. We've provided that out by the seniors have noted in their email out to people that this is available, and we're starting to get people to pick it up. That program's going very well. The masks are coming in and they're being sorted up so people can just call the senior center for a mask. We're trying to get them out to the seniors and people in need first. We're asking people that if you can make a mask, to make one for yourself and maybe your neighbors. We're trying to keep these for the seniors and people in need, but if people need a mask, they can call the senior center, and a mask would be available for them in a Ziploc bag, and it'll be placed out there for them for a pickup. We have quite a few people in the community that have come forward to make masks, and they're still coming forward, and it's been a terrific program. We have asked the people when they come in to pick up a mask if they could bring one canned good to leave a can, and that would go towards the senior food pantry. And I can kind of just end with today. We did have 2 positive cases today for a total of 65 positive cases overall. We're following 16 positive cases right now because some people, after they go through their 14-day quarantine, drop off the total list. We've had 2 deaths, so overall we've had 47 people recover. That's a update that we give that update to Dan and the staff each day. We give the number of positive cases that we're following to the first responders, police, and fire department each morning. And then during the day, if there's any positives, so they can stay up to date with cases also at that time. We monitor the cases on a regular basis to make sure when they come in that we have a correct address. And I would say over the last week, we've probably found about 5 cases that were coming in through Yarmouth that had old addresses or addresses that needed to be relocated to a different town. So that's the general overview. We can take more questions.
Mike, can I ask a question?
Tracy?
Bruce, can you tell me, I'm sorry, I hadn't heard about this, the vote from the Board of Health yesterday. I'm not sure how it's getting out to the public, but can you tell me the specifics of what the vote was? In relation to...
Yes, certainly. The vote was to have inside, people working inside employees to have a facial covering. Not necessarily a mask, because we want to hold the surgical mask and the N95 mask for the first responders. So they can use a cloth mask themselves. They can use a bandana or a scarf. but any employee inside working needs to have a facial covering. We got that notice out, approved last night by the Board of Health. That was sent out to the grocery stores by email today. Some of them that didn't have it were delivered. We also worked with the Chamber of Commerce, touched base with them, gave them a copy of the regulation that they could send out to their membership also. Also within the regulation requires the store to post on the door strongly recommending anyone enter also to have a mask. So we gave them that wording to put on also. So that's was passed out today. Sandwich approved a similar regulation about a week and a half ago, and Falmouth also approved the similar regulation facial covering last night also. So you have 3 towns on the Cape that have proceeded that way.
So what?
The sign on the door also states that it's in accordance with the CDC, and that's where all this originated from. They changed their guidelines on wearing face masks or face coverings.
All right, well, I'm just concerned about that type of stuff getting out to the public because not everybody's a chamber member, unfortunately. And not everybody's a grocery store. There are a lot of essential businesses that may not be aware. So how are you enforcing that? Is that advisory or?
It's a regulation, but we're also sending it out to other stores that we also license, such as the automotive stores, the hardware stores, some of the other essential businesses that we regulate. That they're getting an email that went out today, and they'll probably get a follow-up email. We'll just be going out, getting that message out the best we can. If we need to deliver some, we will be. From experience in Sandwich, it seemed to spread pretty quick and pretty positive. That we've received good feedback in the past from store owners that wanted an advisory they could put on the door, asking people to wear a facial covering when they went in. So we'll work with people to get that out. We'll just be working with the public on that also. If they call and say, I went to a store and didn't have anything, we would go and talk to that store.
And anyone who's looking at the website, it's on there as well, or it'll be by tomorrow.
I just looked, yeah. I was trying to find it myself, but thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Norm.
Rich, could you put up that chart on the town statistics for April 22nd? That's the one. Okay. You know, certainly, to the extent that there have been advisories asking people to wear masks and stay 6 feet away from other people and so forth, and to the extent that that communication has been successful, certainly that would help, I would think, in Yarmouth. But I'm wondering, what have Mashpee and Harwich done, and Orleans and Eastham, with regard to their golf courses and beaches? Because I think that's one thing that the community is most upset about. And, very frankly, they feel like they're in a socialist environment. They feel like we're being chained to our homes and not being allowed to exercise our normal freedoms, and that it's an affront to our freedoms and liberty.
Well, those towns have closed their golf courses. That's a non-essential. The governor has done that, and I think you see the increase of the virus working its way down Cape. You've seen an increase from the April 14th to April 22nd.
Well, that's
talking to those towns.
Hold on just a minute. You're interpreting these statistics. It has to increase from the 14th to the 20th. The rate has to increase. You're
I
interpreting
think
it
we're
as if
talking about the rate of increase.
interpreting it as something into it that of course it's going to increase. It's a cumulative number.
Not necessarily the rate of increases.
Of course it does.
Not the rate of increasing. Increasing could continue. It's at the rate that may change, I believe.
No, no, doctor, I'm sorry. Your statistical analysis is incorrect.
If every day there's 10 more cases, compare that to every day there's an additional case, that's significant. In other words, how
It's not a-
rapidly
it's- it-
is
it's
there an
not a-
increase?
It's not a rate per day per 100,000. It's a cumulative rate per 100,000 people. So as the number goes up cumulatively, so does the rate per 100,000 people, doctor.
It's hard without it in front of me. Of course, the numbers are going up. I'm not arguing with you that way. We're just talking about the rate of number of cases per day. How does that change? In other words,
That
if you look
isn't
at
being
Yarmouth,
presented. That's not what is being presented. What is being presented
I don't
is a
have the,
cumulative
I
number.
don't
What I
have the
was
graph in
asking
front of me,
was-
so.
But what I was asking was, of the communities that have similar numbers to us or that have lower numbers than we do, have they all closed their beaches and created a big issue for the residents? Have they all
I think it
closed
varies.
their parks and beaches?
I don't believe so.
What about Chatham? What about Eastham? What about Mashpee? What about Wellfleet? And they're zero. Have they all closed down everything and their beaches and parks?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So what this is indicating, what the statistics are showing, is that their results are better, and they haven't been as restrictive as we have. And we've got all of our residents upset with us. We're closing this step of closing down an additional parking lot. Just poured salt in the wounds already. We're
I
not
beg to
in a
differ with you on
socialist
this.
society. We're in a free society.
Absolutely. Let's take a look at what the governor has said. Basically, it's a stay at home. Okay, that's the order. Yes, go out and get some
That's not the
exercise.
order.
We're
That's
trying
not
to.
the order. It's an advisory.
And that's not all the governor has said about that.
That's right.
Of course not. I don't think you can safely compare town to town with the pool as small as it is. Of looking at positives, it's quite small a pool. The variables are enormous. If you're looking at a virus and how it spreads, it's important, the distance you are from the bridges, for instance. Where do people from New York come from in New Jersey? Where do they go on the Cape? How many weekend house owners do we have? The variables are enormous. So I don't think we're going to make major interpretations. What the Board of Health and the Health Department in Yarmouth felt making essentially the restrictions they've done in what they believe and we believe will decrease the number of people who are going to get infected in Yarmouth. And that's our goal. We're trying to keep people.
I think, Doctor, the state health regulations require that you show a relationship between regulation, the need for a regulation, and some sort of health problem. So if you're saying the statistics don't mean anything, then how can you be proposing any regulations?
I didn't say statistics show nothing. Please don't put words in my mouth.
I just think we're living in.
Look, what just started was a contact tracing collaborative. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. And they quoted the R factor. If you don't recall what that number is, the R is the number of people on average a person who's infected spreads. How many people do they spread the infection to? And that's what's been difficult about controlling this virus is how infectious it is. The transmission is very difficult to reduce. It could be up to 5 days that anyone who's infected could be spreading the virus. And the numbers we received from this new collaborative was that the R number was over 4. I wasn't even aware of that. I thought it was around 3. And what maintaining the social distancing and the stay-at-home advisory, if that's what it's called, has reduced the R to a little bit above 1. That's not enough to stop the spread of the virus, okay? As long as it's over 1, the infection will continue to spread. The only way we can really stop the spread is if anyone who's infected either dies or doesn't interact with other people. That's the only way we're going to get a control over this. And so the Yarmouth Board of Health and the health department feel that the more we can do to restrict the interactions of people, of where people are gathering, will reduce the number of people infected and get sick.
Are we sure?
That's our mission.
Are we sure that it's interaction of people and that it's not simply a matter of, I go to the market, I'm infected, and the first 3 days of my infection are undetected or are never detected. I just happen to have the virus for 14 days, and during that entire period of time, I've gone to the market 3 times and shed virus all over the shelves. And people come in and they touch the same surface that I touched, and they get the virus, and they go home and they have it. So where is the proof? Where is the data that shows the direct relationship for these regulations to what is occurring with the virus?
It's been very clearly stated by the CDC. If you want to look at what's coming out of the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, you're transmitting it either in the air, by the aerosol, or by touch. That's how we're transmitting this virus. So it could be by a surface. It would depend upon the type of surface, how long the virus remains viable on it, or it's the aerosol, just when you're speaking, that you can transmit the virus. It's not by the food we're eating at the grocery. It's not how it's transmitted. So the science is there. Any of us who are watching TV and watching the reports in the Center for Disease Control, that we know. We know how this virus is transmitted.
I think certainly that whole story has been changing over the last 3 weeks. 3 weeks ago, the CDC says, "Oh, no, you don't need to wear masks. That's not an issue." And then suddenly that changed. So I understand what you're saying about food transmission, but I frankly, I have serious doubts about the conclusions that have been reached in that regard.
I want to make sure I understand this in the public at home as well. You're questioning of how the virus is transmitted. I just want to make sure I understand this.
My question is, what data do you have that justifies the regulations that are more restrictive in Yarmouth than in other towns? Because we've got our residents all inflamed over their rights being abridged and their freedoms being diminished. And I don't take that lightly. As an elected official,
I don't either.
I pledged to uphold the Constitution, and I think this is a Bill of Rights issue.
I agree with you. It is, and it's a major. It's fascinating and a difficult question of civil rights here in our country, and restrictions. You can go back to seatbelts. There's a law saying we have to wrap our bodies with a seatbelt when we get in the car. You don't have to follow it. You could get arrested. Should a person be able to drive a car and not have a seatbelt on? So this has come up. This is a common and issue in our country, and it's a good one. I don't question why some people are very supportive and some are not. It's the mission really of the Board of Health is to maintain, the health of the environment and the people here.
My
That's,
issue is
you
not
know, how
about
the board of-
seatbelts or what's going on in the rest of the country. My issue is about the town of Yarmouth and the fact that we've got residents all upset over, because regulations have been imposed on them that make their lives more difficult and take away their rights.
And I understand how those people feel. Not everyone feels that way. And it is a tremendous sacrifice. I mean, it's affecting me as well. Like anyone who likes to walk on the beach. Yes, the people who follow the rules, yes, they're making that sacrifice as opposed to people just gathering on a beach. And that's unfortunate. That's what happens. And it's making a sacrifice, but we're talking about a pandemic, okay? So far, we've done okay here on the Cape. I can just tell you, we've been very lucky on Cape Cod. And I think, the Board of Health has been rather proactive in attempting to keep people safe. And yes, people are not playing golf. And it is a sacrifice. I'm not making little of that.
I think it's more than a sacrifice. I think it's a sacrilege to our society here in this country.
All right, does anybody else want to be heard on the non-financial aspects of the COVID-19 virus before we get to the financial issues? I want to make one comment if nobody else has any. One thing that bothers me is, why do we as selectmen always hear about closures from the public? Why are we not advised in advance? I get calls and texts saying, why is the parking lot at Old Townhouse Park, why is that blocked off? I said, this is the first I'm hearing of it. Obviously, it's probably something the Board of Health is involved with. But why are we always the last to know? I find that really upsetting and irritating.
Well, I think Dan should answer that question because I think Dan knows the answer to that. Dan, when did you order that parking lot closed?
We discussed it on Friday of last week or Thursday of last week.
And so we had to go the weekend and get emails from residents about it.
Townhouse Park has been a problem since the closures went into effect. And we took commentary from the police department about that throughout the duration of the last 6 weeks. What we didn't want to do is close everything off so people couldn't feel like they couldn't do like passive recreation. So at Townhouse, it has been a recurrent problem there. And the police were like, we don't want to get out into the situation and get into people's faces about this, but we need to do something about, on a nice day, a lot of people congregate there. So the board was pretty, adamant that they wanted more closure to that location. As it relates to Bayberry, I had not agreed to close Bayberry at all until I was shown pictures of golfers putting gear into their car. And I said, until we can get a temporary blockade just to the golf course for the weekend, we'll put the gate down. And it was open, I think, today. That was supposed to be what the rationale was. If I didn't notify you, that's on me. That's correct. But this is a delicate balancing act that we're trying to make as many people happy as we can. But at the same time, we have serious concerns that have come to us from other citizens about congregation in these locations.
Why isn't our board asked about these things rather than just go out and dictate that these things be done?
Because
I think it's very unfortunate.
that's the point of the meeting tonight. Unfortunately, these things we're responding to in live time and decisions have to be made. And that was brought up tonight. And that's why we're having this discussion. But going forward, the plan is to try to keep the gates from being closed. Now, the dog park, Jeff Colby was on weeks and weeks ago. We talked about that was closed right out of the gate at Sandy Pond. And the board was part of that discussion.
I just don't think that the closure of public facilities over which the board at the very least has concurrent jurisdiction, the action should be taken to close off those facilities without consulting with the Board of Selectmen. I have yet,
I can't do that through email because that would violate the open meeting law, and that's why we're discussing it tonight. And I did not want to do that last week, except for that the commentary from Hillary was convincing that something needed to get done. But that being said, the plan was to put out better signage and a better barricade at Bayberry so that lower parking lot had been consistent, so people had access to that so they can get on the bike trail.
look at it from the standpoint of public perception, though. People elect selectmen from the public to represent their interests. And then they're told by the board that the board is unaware of certain actions that will be taking, closing off public facilities. It just puts us in a very bad light, I think. Does anyone else have anything on this? All right, let's move on to the financial issues.
You want to start with FY20?
Yes.
So the good news there is that the commissioner of DESC was on a statewide call today. They don't anticipate any end of the year fiscal damage to the school district, which is good news as well. That being said, the state will come out with some further guidance, but they also don't believe that there's going to be significant in-year fiscal 20 problems with finances. There's supposed to be a statewide conference call with finance directors later this week to reiterate that. So most of our focus has been on ensuring that to the extent possible, we preserve vacant positions as vacant so that that would yield some free cash. And that spending is related to associated with public safety and IT and things related to being able to respond to the virus. So to the extent possible, we're trying to ensure that we are, as conservative as possible. Fiscal 21 is a little bit of a different scenario, and Rich has a number of documents that he'd like to share with you related to that.
Then let's go back to what the subject we just talked about. Is there a decision, or are you asking us for participation, or are you just saying, here's the dictate that we have to live with?
I don't understand what you're talking about.
I'm talking about the access to the parking lot going into Bayberry.
Bayberry, the golf part of the area is supposed to be not, people aren't supposed to play golf, nor.
I recognize that, and there may be one or two people a weekend going out there. Big deal.
Norm, I'm in the middle of this, okay? So I hear from the health department, who we had weeks ago a legal opinion on. They want us to be, in my perspective, far more conservative about shutting off access. I'm trying to appease everybody, and for everybody that says they're upset about their civil liberties being abridged, I have emails from people saying that, what's wrong with people? Why are they out there walking around and doing these things? So I'd like to get some guidance. If you'd like to tell me what to do, I'd ask for a vote right now. Tell me what you'd like me to do. But I feel like I'm caught in the middle trying to referee between two boards that are apparently at a disagreement over this particular topic.
Have you asked the select board? I
That
think
was
that's
what
part
the-
of the issue, Dan. You don't even ask the select board. You just went out and did whatever Bruce and the doctor said to do. You didn't ask us.
I believe that the legal opinion that the board was given, as well as the Board of Health, puts me into a tenuous position as it relates. So, in a perfect world, Norm, I wish both boards would sit together and be in agreement with what we're supposed to do, but that's not apparently going to happen.
Well, we don't even get asked.
But the boards have been opposed on this particular topic from the very beginning.
That's right, because we were never asked. We never participated to any degree in the decision to start with. That's the issue, Dan. And you could have avoided that. You could have avoided that by saying to the Board of Health, look, you need to go before the select board and talk about this.
Norm, I did do that. And you know what they said to me? They had a legal opinion that said they didn't need to do that.
Where did they get that legal opinion, Dan?
That was part of the
Because they didn't have that when they first passed that regulation.
They did. They actually had unofficial correspondence with town council that they were within their right to do that. It was further asked for.
To resign.
Excuse me? Well, I didn't hear that. Somebody want to share that with me?
Who just spoke? I don't even know. I'm looking at the screen. There's one unidentified thing. It says iPhone on there. Rich, who's that?
There's several people I don't know.
Hmm?
There's several people I don't know, but they're all muted.
Okay. I don't know, Dan. I don't know who said what. Can't tell. Rich can't tell.
Well, I'd like to have a vote, have the board take a vote and tell me what they'd like me to do, because there's apparently a disagreement of significance on this topic.
I move that we not close any more facilities without the Board of Selectmen being involved in that decision. And number two, that we open up the parking lot at the Bayberry Golf Course at the entrance, which is used by bikers and walkers and a lot of different groups other than one or two golfers that may show up.
I have a second.
I'll second that.
Who's the second? Tracy?
I want to preface my comments, and I understand Norm's upset. I don't necessarily think it's fair. I do believe the board should be more involved and better communication. But this back and forth browbeating is not at all productive. And I'm sorry that we disagree, and we do have two boards that disagree. But we've stated our case already, and we've been, to Dan's point, we've been advised by council that they have the authority to do that. Now they have the authority based on what Norm's question was, is that they have to have specific data. But we were advised also that, if it was ever challenged in court, we would probably lose. So Dan is in a tough position. I second that because I do think we should be involved in future, which was his motion. And the parking lot, I think, is completely separate from the golf area. But, it doesn't mean that I think that it's a free-for-all, Dan's there reacting to what he's hearing and doing the best he can. And it's a difficult situation. We're here to talk about it now. And, to the extent possible that we can keep these places open, that it's in our purview, then I get it. But the golf has been closed by the governor. That has had nothing to do with him. The beaches are a different issue, but we've been down this road. I mean, we're going on an hour now. It's just not productive. We disagree with the Board of Health. We've said it. We're on record saying it. They believe they're doing what's best. They're volunteers. They're doing what they feel is best, and we're doing what we feel is best. Unfortunately, we don't have any other authority here.
All right, does anyone else want to be heard on the motion before we vote on it? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for a vote then. Eric?
Aye.
Norm?
Aye.
Mark? I can't hear Mark. I think Mark's muted.
I'm not muted now.
No, you're not.
No, I vote aye.
Tracy?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. So that passes unanimously. So Dan, backing up to the FY20 budget, I want to be clear on that. You say that we're going to be okay there?
I'm saying the state is telling us the revenue forecast that they had generated, that was proposition for the state's budget, is supposed to be okay. Now, that being said, I'm going to ask the board for an executive session next week to talk about some internal personnel issues that I think that it should be undertaken as it relates to the recent extension on the stay-at-home order.
That's good. I was just gonna ask about that.
Yeah, I can't talk about it in an open session.
No, I understand, but the state, while the state numbers may be, very little of our budget really comes from the state. The majority of our budget really is local. How much have you, I know we have free cash. I'm not sure if that's how we're planning on covering the shortfalls of the receipts for FY20.
No, right now, we're not planning on doing that at all, so.
So what's our plan other than, what is your projection for the shortfall for this year?
Revenue projection as
For
of the end of
local.
March was, we were still just a little bit over 100% on receipts. So as we get through a little bit more on the fourth quarter here, we'll know a little bit more. So we're going to do some non-filling of positions, some non expenditures that are not vital to keep the town going. And once we get a better understanding of what the fourth quarter revenue looks like, we'll be able to match that up with other cuts that we can make internally.
Okay,
That
so,
coupled with
Yeah,
some-
Can I make a comment on that? Can I make a comment? Dan, I appreciate that. I looked at the latest reports that you sent out for both February and March. And I was most concerned about the revenue reports because that's where we're going to see leakage, I think. And what the reports are indicating is that we're tracking along fine through the end of March, I think, just as you said.
That's right.
And my suspicion is that we're going to end up at least 25% short on meals and rooms for the last quarter. That being said, I'm not sure that we'll end up being less than budget, however. I think we'll be on budget. But what that means to me is that we're going to have near zero of free cash when we get to the end of the year. So I don't think that for fiscal 20, we're going to have a problem with a budget shortfall based on revenue trends. But I think that we won't have any free cash to work with. Last 4 years, we've had $2 million or more of free cash at the end of each year. And a little of that has come from spending decreases or not spending up to budget. But most of it has come through an increase in revenues and also budgeting less than what the trend has been in revenue. So I think that what's going to happen is we'll end up right on budget for revenues and expenses, and we'll have very little free cash. I think the problem that could crop up is that if we have a lot of people delay payment on taxes, we may end up with an increase in our accounts receivable, which is effectively the same thing. It's a shortfall in tax revenues. That in itself could impact us negatively, and I don't know how to call that at this point. And I think we need to very closely watch that in the next few months, I think is what you're suggesting. But it's not just the local receipts, it's also our tax revenues, because people that are out of work, you know, if it were me, I know I'm going to put food on the table. I'm not going to pay a $2,000 bill from the town for taxes. And, you know, I'm not going to endanger my family's welfare by paying the tax bill. And I'll suffer the consequences. I'm not going to miss a mortgage payment and pay the town's taxes. You know, the priorities are going to be there for people that are probably going to push the tax payments off into the future. You know, those are recoverable at some point, but my point is we will probably end up with a zero amount of free cash for fiscal 20.
That's a great point, Norm. Let me go to Rich Bienvenu and see if he can shed some light on that.
You know, to Norm's point, Ed Centeo, our finance director, who's on the meeting, I believe, is on his checking our revenue collections every day. And I checked in with Ed today in preparing some documents to send along to the board. And in looking at it with Ed, we believe that we'll be at budget on our local receipts, as you indicated, Norm, maybe a little bit over, but not significantly. We do think we'll have some savings on appropriations. We are taking steps to not spend where we can. We are looking at old accounts and articles that can be closed that would then generate free cash. And that could happen this year, or it could happen in FY21, either way. So we think we will have some level of free cash to return for the end of this fiscal year. And then one of the things that's in front of you is some adjustments to the town meeting warrant and the FY21 budget, which would also preserve some free cash. But all that being said, yeah, points well taken on the property tax. That's the big unknown, how that comes in. Although we seem to have, in talking with Ed, dodged a little bit of bullet with the mortgage companies and banks that collect have remitted taxes in a timely fashion. So that was a positive. But that is being looked at every day, and to the extent we have any issues that we see, we definitely will let you know as they arise. Ed, are you on?
I see that Ed has
Yeah,
come on.
yeah, I can give you a perspective if you like.
Sure.
So looking at the real estate taxes as of this morning, we're at 84.09% of the total real estate taxes. We're looking for, I'm sorry, 81.39%. That was personal property. We're looking for an additional $11.6 million in receipts. We believe from one of the mortgage processors that handles a lot of banks. We'll get in $1 million, and I think many people will still pay as of May 1st. They may not wait until the end, so I think we're going to have a good read as of May 1st. And then in terms of the estimated receipts, local receipts, we're at, as of today, we're at 94.48% of where we were last year. That puts us fairly close to the full year budget. And we have some one-time things. Hopefully the dentist folks will actually have their town meeting and they'll pay us the amount they owe us for the feasibility study. And there'll be other one-time types of receipts that I think will pull us through as far as the full year budget is concerned. But we're watching the real estate numbers, and what we can do is, as we give you those reports each month, we can give you those numbers in addition to the revenue trending numbers.
Where the concern lies with regard to FY20, and Ed's on this as well, and me to a lesser extent as well, is the issue with our golf course. As you know, it's closed right now. And so Ed's done a projection, what if it's closed for the month of April? What if it's closed for the month of May? What if it's closed for the month of June? And based on that projection, one of our recommendations that we'll get into in a bit would be setting aside some money for the upcoming town meeting to supplement that any shortfalls in golf revenues. Obviously, April, May, and June are relatively good months for the golf course. And if it's closed, we're projecting upwards of potentially of $300,000 of a revenue shortfall in golf. That could be covered by free cash or another method, but that would be our free cash impact if that's the route you chose to go.
We also have, I think it's $480,000 of tornado revenue available for next year as well.
I wanted to ask Ed a question about our commercial properties because, you know, they've been hard hit in this, and with zero revenues now this time of year, many of the businesses, especially the hotels and motels, would probably not have enjoyed much revenue in any case. Restaurants, you know, I think restaurants that are open would have done okay during this time period. So they're probably in a difficult situation. But I guess what I'm wondering is, will they be able to ask for reductions in their projected tax rates for fiscal 21, if not fiscal 20, but certainly for fiscal 21, based on the fact that they will have had lesser profitability?
Yeah, unfortunately, when we send out our income and expense forms for the businesses, it's for the prior calendar year. So we're looking for those reports coming in from the businesses. So that's a lagging type of look at their income and expenses. We can ask the DOR if they have any guidance, the Bureau of Local Receipts, if they have any guidance as it relates to those types of situations. But at this point in time, our analysis looks at what happened in the previous calendar year.
But can a business, just like a resident, appeal their taxes at any time they wish?
Yes, they can. Yep, they can apply for an abatement. Absolutely.
So they could come back and say, look, you know, I know what the numbers say, but you know, here's what happened in, you know, for this year, and that's going to continue into the next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think unfortunately the way the mechanism works is that would impact their taxes for next year, but not for fiscal year 20. But I can look into that.
Right. Okay.
Ed, when you talked about the percentage of receipts, what was that number? Was it about 84%?
Actually, when we're looking at the non-tax levy accounts, what comes in the revenue trending report that you
Yes.
see on a monthly basis, we're at 94.48%
Okay.
as of today. The receipts that we actually received yesterday.
Okay, what's the percentage on the real estate tax revenue?
Real estate is 81.39% and approximately $11.7 million that we're looking to receive. And again, we'll have a better read for that, you know, May 2nd, May 3rd.
Are there any big accounts that you're waiting to hear from in terms of businesses that handle the escrows on the mortgages? Or have they
Those
all pretty
businesses
much-
that
have they
handle
all pretty much remitted?
Yes. So we received a little over $8 million from CoreLogic, and then Loretta Corp and other businesses that send us a large file for all of the banks that they service. They'll be remitting those funds. They have largely received all of those escrow payments before the crisis came into play. And they're also being kind to their mortgage holders through this situation as well. So I believe anything that was paid or any situation where somebody is paying via an escrow account will be handled, or we will receive that money. And we have received payments from some very large businesses, but the different demographics, the individual businesses will be affected differently than some other businesses. So we're not sure what that total impact will be.
So in terms of Norm's concern that we'll have little free cash, do you have any rough projections about what you would anticipate would be carrying over on free cash? If any?
Well, that is part of the presentation we have for you tonight, is a slide on that.
Okay. All right. Now for the, I guess, FY21 budget impacts.
So I'll have, late today was sent out to you. I'm sorry you didn't get it much in advance. There's a summary slideshow, and then there's a more detailed sheet, which I'm just going to show briefly now. And then, of course, if you have questions, you can dig into it. But I went back, and just for frame of reference, not that they're equivalent circumstances at all, but back in 2008, 9, and 10, our decline in revenues was about a 10.5% decline in those tough years. We're planning here, we're not sure exactly what it's going to be, but a good place to start seemed to be what would happen if we had a 10% decrease in state aid, which is about $170,000, and a 25% decrease in total local receipts for a total of just under $4.4 million. And how would we address that? And so most of the new items, we've got them listed that were adds to the budget for this upcoming fiscal year have been removed. We've reduced our property tax overlay and stormwater funding, OPEB funding from the levy, and adjusted down some budget accounts based on the last month and a half that we've had to get additional information. And so that's the detail of those. And I'm just going to convert over now to the summary. Just it's a little perhaps easier to follow. And so here's the 4.358 that we're looking to accommodate, at least as a starting target. Operating budget adjustments for FY21 is the $1,166,900. We'd require some maneuvering on this, but I've been talking with Karen Green, the Community Development Department, about we're still required by special legislation to raise the Tourism Revenue Preservation Fund, but we really don't have the funding to do that. But perhaps, we still have to raise it, but perhaps we can reallocate some expenditures to that fund out of the operating budget, as well as our Community Development Block Grant and some CPA funding. We did look to increase budget funding from other sources, other available funds, and really boost those up, including an increase in indirect cost allocations to water and septic enterprise funds. And that gets us quite there, but not quite all the way. And so the other piece of this is on our Article 8, I believe it is, at town meeting. We would eliminate the non-tax levy amounts to preserve those funds for operating costs going forward, and also perhaps still appropriate the capital funds, but put a freeze on almost all of it. That's the $1.3 million that you see and the $1.1 million. And the combination of all those items results in just about $5.5 million, which is more than what a 25% decline is. It represents about a drop in revenue of upwards of 33% if we followed through on that menu of options. It also accommodates the heads up or warning, so to speak, and Ed could speak to it, that we got from S&P when we received our recent rating review, that they want to see us estimate receipts at 85%. And so this achieves that. And then the spending freezes down here, in fact, preserve additional funds above and beyond that.
Rich, does this take into account at all any projections, or have you had any communication with the school department about what their projections are and how that might affect us?
No, it does not take into account increases. So those are reflect budget reductions that we can control. It doesn't account for any potential increases that might come otherwise. We're not expecting state assessments necessarily to go up, but obviously DY and Cape Cod Tech would be our big concern.
Right, but based on the state's financial situation, it's good to believe that they're going to see a reduction in state funding, which will then turn their budget to the towns.
Yeah, perhaps. And that's why we've got, instead of just the 25%, what the result we came up with was about a third. And then we have some other things, let me just run through real quickly, that we have set aside at the moment as well. So some additional measures to consider. All our free cash requests have been deferred to town meeting, for default town meeting. The article we're suggesting is the draft, the town meeting warrant that was resent to you has a free cash article eliminated, with the exception of some amounts that we think that are needed, that are necessary to the operation from FEMA and vehicle repairs, which is the only request. We're talking about hiring freezes for unfilled positions, depending on how that's executed and on what level, somewhere between $500,000 and $800,000 of savings that we'd be able to preserve within the budget. And as Ed started to speak to, closing of unused articles and accounts to generate one-time free cash of generate somewhere between $500,000 and $750,000 as well. And I did want to point out our current reserves of about 5.6 million in stabilization funds. As a result of not doing the free cash article at town meeting, we'll have unspent free cash of over 2.6 million. And this is really just a guesstimate, but we think we will have some free cash, but it certainly won't be the order of magnitude of what we've been seeing the last couple of years, but maybe around $1 million. And our ambulance receipts fund should have continued receipts replenished to about $2 million as well. Then finally, further measures that we could evaluate, implement if we need to do beyond what we've already done, or look at a multi-year event. We do have further expenditure budget reductions between 250 and 500,000. We could go beyond that, but those beyond measures would be substantial elimination of divisions or programs. We have hour and salary reductions where those are feasible to do, perhaps furloughs, perhaps an early retirement program either offered through the state or something that we'd have to craft on our own, typically. And also, finally, then we've got the discussion of layoffs. It's kind of where we are at the moment with our budget planning. Ed, did you want to add anything to that before I wrap up?
Nope, good summary. Thank you, Rich.
Mike, this is Eric. Can I ask a question?
It's on mute me. Go ahead, Eric. I was on mute, so go ahead.
Thank you. Rich, did I not see early on when this started that the governor allowed for towns to tap into enterprise funds to fund budget shortfalls?
I'm not sure if you saw that or not, but way we were addressing that is by utilizing through an indirect cost process, allocating as much as we could. And perhaps we could go even further, but we've maxed them out to the extent that we've considered this in the current environment, or the more recent environment. In the recent years, we've kind of maxed them out. But if we needed to, of course, we could probably figure out a way to do more.
And
question with the road, the 1.1 million in road spending. Will we receive, what do we typically get from the state? About 900,000 for that?
Right, so if we suspended or had a freeze, I should say, on the roadways, we still have some unspent articles that would enable the DPW to continue some of the work they've been doing, and then they do have their Chapter 90 allocations. At what level those remain, we're not sure, but we do have some unspent allocations that could be get them through a year or two or a short-term period.
So we do not expect that because we are not allocating that money towards road work that the state would not, it's not a match. That money comes anyway, correct?
That's
It's
correct.
the override money, right?
The 1.1 is the override. We get money, it used to be about 900,000 that we got from the state. And the 1.1 is specifically the technical override we did a long time ago. But I just wanted to make sure that that any monies that were, likely to come from the state, however reduced, wouldn't be held back because, the state said, well, you're not doing your share, so we're not going to send anything your way on our end either.
No, that's an entitlement, so to speak. It's not a match by any means.
What are the downsides? This indirect cost allocation, it's kind of like robbing Peter to pay Paul. The water department faces major capital expenditures in the next few years. And at the septic facility, there was going to be some reallocation of septic reserves to wastewater. If we start charging significantly higher indirect cost allocations to these funds, then it's going to draw down their reserves and make those funds then unavailable for future requirements. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Well, if you were to totally bang it out above and beyond what it could sustain, then yes, you're correct. But the amounts that we're suggesting at this point we think are sustainable and supportable with how the DOR calculates indirect cost allocations, and we think they're sustainable certainly over the short term. Short term meaning anywhere between 1 and 3 years. We did bring back, in addition, although we are increasing, I haven't changed within the budget that we've discussed previously. I left the amounts that we took out of those funds from last year that we talked about are still within the general fund. So I have to go back and look, but I don't know that we have a huge increase. We have an increase in the indirect cost allocation, but we also have a decrease in the expenses that were parked in those funds.
And just, this is Ed Santio, another comment. We have to actually justify how we calculate the indirect charges for our auditors and for the state. And that's part of a, formula that allocates the different overhead costs to those entities. And notwithstanding Selectman Tolley's comment, I think there's still an upper limit that we can use. And I think there was a comment that indicated that we could use, even if we didn't appropriate it, any free cash that was available based on the DOR's assessment. I didn't hear about the enterprise funds, but I did hear that we could do things with free cash during the emergency.
Yeah, not that I want to tap into those, but I mean, I do recall seeing that early on in an announcement from the governor that was going to begin to be allowed. So,
okay,
maybe something to research just to have in our back pocket. But I agree to Norm's point.
We might need every tool we can get.
Yeah, I mean, to Norm's point, you can't take from one source that has tremendous needs in the near future and then expect to be able to do anything with what's left over. It's not ideal.
I'm trying to remember, Eric. I think what I read in the legislation that was passed is that if an enterprise fund had a loss, as a result of the COVID-19 crisis, that it could recover that or make that loss up over a 3-year period.
Yeah.
So that the general fund didn't have to immediately
Yes.
increase the funding. That was what I was hearing. I don't recall the other situation, but I could be wrong about that.
And that would really be any deficit over the next 3 years, general fund included.
Right.
So, we're planning for a 33%, on the first pass year, we think we're protecting it against a 33% decline in revenues or additional expenses, however you want to look at it. And if we need to do more, we could do more. And if we end up incurring some sort of deficit, we could then recover that over a 3-year period, which would give us time to implement the further adjustments.
Rich, can I ask you to go back to the list of reductions? There are a few items on that list that I saw that had me concerned. Yeah, this list. Can you kind of, these are reductions, but in some cases, I'm assuming, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but in some cases we are leaving some funds for these items still. So wastewater funding, there's a reduction of 625. Is that the full budget for funding, or is there a remaining? Can you just go down and talk about these specific reductions, what's left and what the plan is?
Sure. So I think you can see my cursor on the screen
Yes,
here. So these first several up to the 625 were additions to the FY21 budget that we're reversing, will no longer be additions.
Okay.
Those are easy.
Yeah.
Wastewater funding, the 625 was the amount that was in the levy that was going to be 500 funded from new short-term rentals, which I know we can't necessarily count on either. But that was within our total, that was part in our calculation of our 95% of our budget of the prior year actual. So even with that 500,000, we were still at 95%. And the other 125 was from energy savings. So we've backed that out and are no longer looking to raise that, as we are no looking longer to do much of the wastewater stuff.
So so this was our pre-funding for the future debt that we're eliminating here?
Right.
Right.
Oh, that's a problem.
Yeah, it is a problem because then, we had agreed on a policy that we were going to set aside those funds and, and not spend them for other purposes. So to the extent that we have Airbnb revenues, then we're going to have a line item and whatever it is to offset that, so that the money doesn't get just used by the general fund, which is really what is happening as a result of that 625.
That is right. That's correct. Well, I mean, when we put that together, we were assuming we're going to have $500,000 of Airbnb third-party rentals. I don't know that that's what we're going to have anymore, but for this year at least. But you're right. We could track that separately, and we could have a number of approaches to that. We could not include it as a reduction and come up with it some other way. We could track it similar to what I'm thinking we probably will have to do with the tourism money, and provide for repaying it in the future. Another way, with other funds. So there's a number of ways you could go.
Are we taking the 625 out of our projected revenues for fiscal 21?
The projected revenues for fiscal 21 were at 95% of the FY20 actual. And so I used the lower number, the 95%, and then reduced that by those various percentages, the 5, 10, 15, 25, 33% to arrive at what would a actual reduction look like.
No, my point is the 625 was in the revenues originally and in the expenses. So you're suggesting taking it out of the expenses.
Yeah.
Are we also taking it out of the revenues?
Well, 125,000 of that wasn't revenue, it was repurposed expenses. So the only new revenue would have been 500,000 of short-term rentals.
Right. And
Um,
is that
of
taken
which-
out of the revenue projections?
Well, even when I included it, the total budget, including that 500,000, was still at 95% of the prior year actual.
Right.
Okay.
So when I backed it out, I started with the lower number of the 95% of prior year actual, and then I took 33% of the higher number off of that, or incremental percentages off of that.
All right. So basically what you're saying is we won't have either the revenues or the expenses in the budget.
Right.
Right.
But we will actually collect, to some extent, some amount of Airbnb rentals, which isn't in accordance with your, the policy that you discussed, which was obviously before COVID-19, but
But won't we have the opportunity to allocate those to that fund as
Yeah,
opposed
so-
to dropping them into the,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
as opposed to dropping them into the general fund? I think the intent of our policy was to segregate them and not spend them in the general fund.
Yeah, I understand the policy, and it's certainly within your purview to tell us how you want to move forward, which is why we're sharing this with you. But we're looking at how to accommodate a $4.4 million reduction in revenue. That was one of the elements of it. It doesn't need to be, but that was one path. Let me just finish this list. We did have some other items that we reduced, including stormwater funding and our property tax overlay.
What is the remaining amount in stormwater with that reduction?
0. But we
Is
do
there a
have,
mandate that we work towards that, though? I mean, I'm really concerned about some of these items, being, and I understand, we're doing what we have to do in a really tough time, but these are mandates. And a total reduction without leaving anything working towards it may not be.
we do have unspent proceeds from prior appropriations, and so I'm and all of these items I'll be talking, I already have, and I will be talking further with Jeff Colby as to the availability of funding moving forward. And for example, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but even on the roadways, like down here, it wasn't 100% cut. The levy, the amount raised initially was $1.3 million, and we preserved it. We only froze $1.1 million with the idea that there's some ongoing projects that and costs would be continued to be incurred, and that would cover those required costs. To your point, though, and I'm sorry I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but down here as well, but it's a similar issue that Norm raises. We have to talk with the CEDC, and I started talking with Karen Green about utilizing the PRPF and community development block grant funds to supplement some operating costs. This would be, allocating some of those operating costs to those funds. But it would probably be under an arrangement that, and this is what I'm saying, is that, perhaps we could apply that to the wastewater or to other areas of the budget as well, roadways, is that when we get back to somewhat close to normal, we repay those back in one form or fashion. Perhaps we could take advantage of the 3-year buyback with the DOR as well to accommodate that.
Well, I think we've just learned that putting these things off ends up costing us more money in the long run. I know we have difficult decisions to make, but the earmark for that override was for spending on roads, and I'd hate to go against what the people wanted. That's why we wanted to make sure that it was there, because we pleaded a case that not funding it for so long put us in a situation where we needed that. Perhaps we need to look at some of our stabilization as a one-time use, to make up for some of these. I don't know. I'm not comfortable, sidetracking our wastewater planning, and putting that off.
We have to make a decision this evening on these. I mean, I would hope that we'd be able to, well, first of all, there's some very ticklish issues to discuss that are not on the main page of this. I mean, with regard to potential impacts on our employment and on negotiations with our unions.
They are on here.
Well, I
Not
know, but it's not
detailed.
something that we would, that I certainly would be comfortable discussing in public at this stage.
Well,
This is Ed Santiago, Finance Director. Can I give some perspective to what Rich is talking about? In terms of the stormwater, right now we have $138,000 available for spending that hasn't been encumbered for any particular project. Likewise, for roadway improvements, we have $573,000 that haven't been encumbered. And as was pointed out, we have the Chapter 90 money. And this isn't a situation where this goes on forever, hopefully. Once we get to November and we have all of this free cash and delayed spending, we can remove the freeze and spend all of the roadway money if that's appropriate. We can reallocate free cash reserves as we're able to steward them towards the wastewater reserves if that's what you think is appropriate. So this is a way to kind of get through the initial issues as it relates to COVID-19 and a potential spike during flu season, and then we can reevaluate what we want to do with the funding that we have to try to move forward as a town. I think this is unprecedented. This isn't even like 2008, 2010. This is a more severe drop in our potential revenues. So we may need to just put some things off, get a little bit more perspective on what we're able to do from a funding standpoint, and then look to refund some of the priorities that you all have.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, the answer is no, we don't have to make any decisions tonight. And in fact, I think one of the problems that's beginning to emerge is there may be an inability to conduct a town meeting. That's some of the conversation going on now, in that remote access has not been approved, nor has sending in a ballot. And we're not necessarily convinced that by June, the end of June, we'll be able to put 200 or 300 people in a room. So most of the conversation that I've been hearing across the state on town meeting says you should prepare, and this is the same for the school districts as well. I talked to Ken Jenks today. You should prepare if the condition is such that you can't conduct your town meeting under the very restrictive conditions that it could be out there. Get ready for a 1/12 budget cycle until such time you can bring a mass of humanity together to have a town meeting. So for now, we don't have to have a decision. We just wanted to make sure that going forward that you saw some of the ideas that we had. If there's certain things that you don't like, we can certainly adjust to that level. But at some point soon, I'm going to have to authorize the printing of the warrant just to get ready for our June date. And so by that time, we would need to have some further guidance on what would be acceptable. So again, next week, we'll talk about this. It'll be a standing item the week after, but probably close to the end of May, we're going to need to have some numbers in that book for the warrant. But in the end, we might not even be able to have a town meeting is what I'm hearing now, so.
Have there been any, I know there was some discrepancy with some of the items with the finance committee. Has there been any reconsideration from them on any of these items or on the capital budget committee at all? Because some of those items on the capital budget committee, and I know we've earmarked 1.5 for capital budget, but are we convinced that we need all of that right now as well?
So we're going to be in front of finance tomorrow night and give them the same presentation to get their input tomorrow so that I can have that for you next week. And we'll also at some point in the near future revisit this with capital budget. I'm sure Rich has talked to a few members. This isn't like we're making these decisions in a vacuum.
No, I'm not. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying sometimes as things roll along and we get, they understand the severity of the scenario that we're all in, that maybe sometimes they take another look and have other suggestions as well.
I'd like to make a couple of comments. I know, picking up on something Tracy said earlier, I'd forgotten that the roadway allocation was based upon an override. So wouldn't we technically have to have a reverse override vote
No.
in order to avoid that spending?
That override was for just the general, even though we did it for the roads. It was just a board policy to make sure that that money was set aside for the roads as a policy of our board, so that, because what had happened before to us was we had went for an override for police and fire, and this type of scenario ended up happening, and that money got transferred out of there into something else, which made some people upset, which understandably. So when we went for the road override, again, it's a general override, but our board made a policy that, because it was what we told the people, that was what our policy would make sure that money would go towards. So we were trying to honor the people's vote based on what had happened in the past, but it's not.
Yeah, I guess that's part of my point, is that we wanted to honor their vote, and I'm not sure that just simply saying, well, we thought about it and the need is too great right this moment, so we're going to take that money back. I don't feel very comfortable doing that without asking the taxpayers. And I've forgotten the second question that I had.
I think one of your questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. The other point I wanted to make was that I really think that we need to have some closed door discussions about our strategy with regard to our unions. I think we as a board need to have that, and I don't think it's appropriate that we go into great detail at this point, but I think that we need to consider those alternatives and possibly authorize approaching the unions on those issues. There are already instances where I'm not sure it is on the Cape. It may have been in New Jersey, where towns facing a budget deficit they were talking about having layoffs, and instead what happened is the fire and police departments took 10% pay cuts. And I don't think that just cutting expenses, essentially cutting services to our taxpayers, is appropriate with also talking in depth about potentially what to do with layoffs and those sorts of things.
Well, I'm gonna go on the record as saying, just because we put it out in the public, and I think it's a very dangerous thing to say, that I would never support right now cutting or doing anything to our first responders. They're out there working every day, putting their lives on the line. And if we're going to be looking, that is not the direction of which we should even be considering at this point.
I think one of the considerations, and we don't know exactly what the situation looks like going, even for next year, never mind 2 or 3 years, but hopefully, from what we're hearing from various people, is that we're hopeful that we'll rebound maybe after a year, maybe it takes 18 months, but that this is a short-term thing and that we'll get back to business as usual in a period of time that would allow us to recover and restore some of the appropriations and funding that we had contemplated for this budget back to where we want to be. And to that point, I just want to reiterate that it wasn't necessarily a cut in the capital or in the roadways. Those amounts are still being appropriated, but we're freezing them to, in the event that the revenues don't materialize. So the roadways for the 1.3 are still being appropriated. We're just not spending it. So and at the end of the day, if you end up not spending it, you end up in the same spot. But I guess it's a little bit different. It's not being cut altogether. It is being raised still. It's just we're not spending it until we're sure that the money has come in. Mark, did I see you raised your hand? You are unmuted.
I was just checking to see if it was working.
Oh, okay.
But I do think I think you did a great job in putting together that list. I think that's for me, like Tracy, that's a good starting point. That's where we should focus rather than on the personnel side having any kind of impact on our essential workers. So I think right now, I think you've put a lot on the table for us to look at. I think it's a very healthy list. I think it's a robust one, and I think it's one we should really focus on. So I appreciate the work that went into putting it together. I'm very supportive of the direction that you're laying out for us. I think it's very helpful going forward.
The other piece of the puzzle that, it would be speculation at this point, but it looks like there's a lot of movement on that topic, and maybe Mark, you have some more insight, but there was quite a push to get payments to cities and towns for labor allocations in a upcoming stimulus package. The idea that they did that 10 years ago under the ERA funding has been brought back to life, and certainly we're not going to plan to the idea that we know what that's all about. But if that were to come to fruition, then we would be in a better condition by having a local plan that doesn't address that. That would just bring us back to a more normal sense to preserve payroll as it relates to our staff.
Yeah, I would agree. I think one of the things that's a little disappointing for me, Dan, is that at the federal level, typically when we have a national emergency or disaster declarations, the feds and the state are quick to step in to provide some help. But at the moment, this has become a sticking point.
No, I understand. I followed Richie Neal, a congressman who's also chairman of Ways and Means, was on the airways quite a bit. And I think the brokered piece on that is that if the money does come, you can't use it to pay off your pension liability, if you know what I mean. So I think there was wiggle room that's being worked on, and I think in the end they'll get to that point, because obviously for all of us, the front line is our municipal employees taking care of everybody.
Right. Yeah, I'd like to also respond to a comment that Norm made. I think you're correct, Norm. I think there was some relief in the legislation signed by the governor on the enterprise fund accounts. I think to the extent that we find ourselves in a deficit situation or shortfall, there may be an opportunity to roll over that loss for a period of time, maybe 2 or 3 years. That's my understanding in talking to another finance director in another town.
Yeah, it's a 3-year forgiveness period.
Exactly.
And I just wanted to add one additional thing. Tracy and Norm, you both mentioned wastewater. And Dan, in your comments just reminded me. We did submit a list of projects through the Cape Cod Commission that we considered to be shovel ready, which included all of our wastewater projects, even though they're not necessarily, shovel ready. But some portions of them perhaps are. In anticipation that perhaps there might be some sort of stimulus funding that does provide, similar to the ERA funds back in 2009 that Chatham was able to take advantage of because they are ready to go. And so, we are reducing our wastewater funding and the amounts that we're raising. But perhaps, who knows what things look like a year from now. Might there be another opportunity or another path that's made available to us because of this situation?
Well, let me just speak to that Chatham opportunity. I sort of helped orchestrate that when I was working in a different capacity. That particular funding program was through the Rural Development Administration, and I'm not sure if we're still eligible in Yarmouth for those funds. That might be a funding source that we might want to just double check to see if we're still eligible for that.
In West Yarmouth, we are. Yeah.
We are in West Yarmouth. So is it conceivable that we could apply for work in West Yarmouth, do you think?
Sure.
If there are funds made available through that account?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
All right, anybody else on this before we move on to the next item? Okay, annual town election update.
So I've asked the town clerk, Phil Gadet, to be part of the call. I think he was on the screen a while ago. Phil, if you're there, he generated a couple of memos. The first one was related to changing the date of the annual town election to a point of June 30th was one that would work for us. And that's the last date in which you can have the election for this year. So if you have any questions for Phil.
Well, I have a question reading that. I get very concerned about the consistency of which the polling stations switch. And reading the memo, we have to notify them all by mail. I'm sure that that's an expense. Is there a reason? I mean, I know that they can't make accommodations at all in the month of June at the Realtors Association for us.
Phil had direct contact with that. Phil, if you're unmuted.
Yeah, so yeah, I had a conversation with them, and you know, it's just so fluid. They have planned renovations for the month of June. And so I don't know exactly what date those renovations are. But I, had to go ahead and just make plans with Mattakese DY and Mattakese Middle School to change that. I agree with you, Tracy. I hate to move polling locations at all.
Will they perhaps be finished with the renovations by the 30th? Is it something we can work around?
Yeah, so I'm hoping I'm going to circle back to them. We don't have to have a vote to change the polling place just yet.
Okay.
So it's 20 days before the election is when we have to have, probably before that, but I have to send out notice. The one legal requirement is 20 days before the election, we have to notify the heads of household through mail to change the polling location. So I will certainly naturally, my plan is to circle back with Mid-Tech or the Cape and Island Association of Realtors to do that.
They tell you when their renovations would be complete? Like if we put it off to July 1st, one other day?
Well, that's the problem. We're up against, we have the June 30th deadline from the state to hold the election. So that was the issue. So, I can research avenues to go into July if that's the will of the board. But at this point, I wanted just to make a contingency plan to do that.
Yeah, Phil, I read a document today that would not allow from the state the election to occur after June 30th.
I mean, but we're talking about 1 day, so perhaps they'll be finished with the renovation.
That, and I will certainly circle back with them. Like I said, we don't have to take a vote just yet to change the polling location. I just, we wanted to let you guys know that that's the plan as of now. The situation is fluid, and we will certainly circle back on that.
What would be the expense to send out the notices, Phil?
It'll probably be about, off the top of my head, probably a little less than $1,000, around $1,000.
All right, so you're going to keep us updated on that?
Sure will.
And we'll come back to that, I guess, at a future time.
Okay.
So now we have the DHY update.
Yeah, so we had a conference call with the partner towns last week or the week before. The sentiment of the other towns is to move all of the DHY items to a fall town meeting. Everybody was pretty much in the same position that we've been, which is there's a lot on our plates. The people, the last thing in the world they want to talk about is this topic right now, and to try to slim down the warrants, move all that to the fall. That being said, what I gave to you in the packet was what represented the very last updated agreement. So before we go any further, that was the last document, came out of Copeland and Page at the end of March. Our town council looked at it. They're good with it. I just wanted to make sure that you have it as the final draft before we kind of go on hiatus with this topic. Although that being said, there is one article related to wastewater that Rich can talk about that we should consider for a town meeting, in that it would put us in a position to finance particularly the DOT interface. We have this Mass DOT project on Route 28 that has the promise of offsetting some of our costs, drop pipes in the ground. So we want to have at least a borrowing authorization to be able to participate with the costs that are occurring associated with that project.
So Dan, just a quick overview of reading some of the changes that were made in that DHY agreement. It appears that those were requested by the town of Dennis, and there was an agreement that Dennis would manage or begin to manage, be the manager of the plant. Is that?
No, there hasn't been any conversation like that.
That's what I read.
No, there would all be subject to the commission that has to get seated first to pick an executive director.
Right.
I have never heard that. There was commentary associated with, like, as a for instance, not that any one of the three towns was mentioned like this, but one of the examples that was discussed was in Mansfield. Mansfield continues to do the processing, the payroll, the collections, the notice, the billing and all that for the 3-town district off Cape. And that was always talked about from the beginning with us, is that in order to avoid an infrastructure, you could have one of the host towns perform that duty, but that has never been memorialized in any agreement.
I think the changes had to do, there were requests from the town of Harwich. Myself, Mark, representatives from Dennis met with one of the Harwich selectmen and town administrator. They had some issues on the agreement. One had to do with procurement of engineering services, so that was codified into the agreement. And the other had to do with budget process. I forget what the changes on that, but in any event, it was a matter of wordsmithing that, I believe. It didn't change substantially the agreement that's been discussed in the past.
Well, one of the things that I see is that it's incorporated all the properties that are in relation to the effluent discharge.
Right, so there was no nobody could assess a host. I suppose the best way to look at it is we wanted to avoid anybody being in a situation where they're getting a host payment for any of the locations that the district would need. So they wanted to identify all those common sites that are needed as part of the project.
Right.
Okay, well, I understand that. I guess I'm concerned about the way that those properties are worded in here in terms of control. I don't want those properties in general to have any, I just want to be sure that the wording is such that it's only related to the effluent discharge. In one of the sections, the wording concerned me, and I didn't write it down because typically I go in and I have my paper in front of me and I'm trying to do it from my phone, but there was something specific about the town of Dennis managing initially.
So
And
the commission is going to be charged with the task of negotiating these lease agreements with the towns that are going to be host to these entities, these recharge entities.
Yeah, and in regards to that, to the extent that changed, I think the significant change there, Tracy, there was, you just refreshed my memory, there was language added along Town of Yarmouth's concerns in that regard. So when the commission negotiates those leases or agreements, whatever form they take, they need to consider certain things. And among those things explicitly stated were lost revenues
Right.
from that type of thing.
I recall that language. Trying to find it.
So has further work occurred with regard to the Bass River Golf Course in terms of negotiating specifics on that?
There has not been any further discussion. In fact, I think Tim Garrett, who's the architect, is in the process now of working with golf management to present back to the GEC what would be the final potential options for that. There was some further commentary associated with what parts of the playing course would not be impacted by the project. So they're trying to identify the smallest possible footprint to lay down these effluent beds and then work around that into what and at the same time, make the course what the GEC and golf management and the board would like it to be. So they're just warming up all those documents now as it relates, and that'll be something that's gonna evolve over the course of the next few months as to what that final outcome could look like.
Joe, I had raised a question about alternate facilities at the DY High School, the land available there, and the land at our park area on Townhouse, not Townhouse Road. Yeah.
So my understanding of the ability of a location in town for effluent recharge had been subject to a pretty massive engineering evaluation, the results of which indicated that for the effluent extraction that needs to be done, the location that was the one that was most logical from an engineering and finance perspective was the Bass River site.
I
So
believe,
did they look at the DY playing fields as a potential place? I mean, I don't know what the area is, and what about our park that's right near the golf course? That I mean, we've got a huge park there. I'm not sure what that land is. That land available for recharge area?
I believe this study goes back 10 to 15 years ago, that all these had started to become evaluated. And I do believe all municipally owned land in town was considered. I think Dave Young sent along, and Mark, I don't know if it all kind of runs together, so I don't know, Mark, if you recall, if you got that as well, but Dave Young, we'd sent along a memo regarding that, and also a link or maybe even a copy of the full study. But I do believe it was all municipally owned land was considered, and Bass River Golf Course and Buck Island Road were the two largest, most economical sites. Sure, other sites might be feasible, but they were considered too small, as I understood it,
Right.
to accommodate the amount of flow that we were projecting.
Yeah, if I can just jump in, Rich, and just add to that. Yeah, I think it was in 2006, 2007, the town of Yarmouth had to do a fairly comprehensive analysis of all of the potential recharge sites in the community. And I dug up the study. There are a ton of sites that were identified initially. And then there was some fairly objective screening criteria that were developed in order to evaluate each of the sites. And one of the key criteria that we had to wrestle with in Yarmouth, and I wasn't involved in this, but I was very interested in it, was the whole area of identifying, for example, zone 2s associated with town water supplies. And Yarmouth has a fairly large area set aside as a designated zone 2s. These are recharge sites for our drinking water wells. And so when you just take those, when you factor that in as a criteria, it took out quite a few of the sites that were identified, and it includes a significant portion of some of the DY property that was mentioned before, Norm. I've got the map, I've got some details. I'm happy to share this with anybody that's interested in it. It's fascinating reading, but I can say quite sincerely that it was a fairly exhaustive plan and analysis that was reviewed. And the 2 sites that we've identified as a town that have been incorporated in the overall plan, that is the golf course site and the Buck Island site, were the 2 sites that sort of ranked very high in the evaluation of all the potential sites.
Just a comment further, Mark, because you refreshed my memory, is this was going back a couple years ago now when I first got involved in the process. There was a map, and you referred to it. So pulling that out and making that available again for everybody's reconsideration might be helpful. But the map showed the APD and the wellhead protection districts in the zone 2, and it showed all the locations of town-owned land for potential recharge, and that excluded a good portion of them.
Can I just say one final point here, Rich? I think the fact that it's come up and Norm's raised some good questions about it shows the importance of making it an important feature in any kind of public education plan. People need to know that these sites weren't just picked at random out of a hat, but they were actually identified through a fairly exhaustive analysis and what the key criteria were.
And I got Jeff, and muted Jeff, if Jeff has any comment. Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. But.
Yeah, Rich, I really don't have too much on. I think you and Selectman Forrest did an excellent job of identifying the extensive evaluation that was done, and it really did relate to what wasn't in the APD. And roughly 2/3 of Yarmouth is within the APD, and so it did exclude a lot of sites from consideration.
So we're specifically, I asked because it's a $5 million question. Is Flax Pond ineligible to be used, and are the DY fields ineligible to be used? I thought, gee, put it in the DY sports fields and give them brand new turf, or not turf, but that would enhance their playing fields. I don't know. I'm just asking. I thought that in view of the extraordinary impact on the Bass River Golf Course and the amount of expense involved, I might get a detailed answer.
So I think those answers have been resolved in the past. It's just been some time, so it's not top of mind, but to Mark's point, I will make sure that we start making that available, and I can get it to you, Selectman Holcomb, but we'll also make it more visible on our website and other outreach to make sure that that's addressed. But regardless of where it is, it's still going to cost money to put it in. Just perhaps you're saving money on, redoing a golf course or some other type of facility.
I don't know. I just there was in the previous discussions of wastewater, I don't recall any discussion whatsoever of the Bass River Golf Course, and that didn't come up.
And I think that's because initially back in 2011 and initially in 2015 and 16, when they started to come back up again, we were contemplating a town-only solution centered around Buck Island Road. And if you had a plant in Buck Island Road, then it made sense to keep the effluent recharge at Buck Island Road as opposed to shipping it to the other side of town. But now that we shifted to a centralized plant in Dennis, that's why we shifted the recharge sites, because it was closer from a Dennis facility to go to Bass River as opposed to going all the way back to Buck Island Road again.
And the piece on Bass River, if I could add, is that was always in the plan, but it was in an out year, 20, 30 years out in the plan. But that was always a component once Buck Island Road was completely utilized.
Can I just go back to my original point? when I was talking about the piece that said the town of Dennis, and I think Dan mentioned this, but in the addendums in Exhibit B, it's on page 36. In the initial management operation of the partnership, it lists that the partnership would enter into a management operation agreement with the town of Dennis.
What page was that?
It's on page 36 of the draft agreement. It's highlighted in yellow. That's why it jumped out at me. I just was trying to figure out if that's just a short term until it's transferred into a different form, or why that change was there.
I think I've missed like one meeting or two meetings in 3 years on this, and I don't ever recall anybody talking about a specific town having.
Do you see it in B5, section B5?
Yeah.
Okay. On page 36.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that got, it could be Yarmouth, it could be Harwich, or it could be Dennis. That is news to me. Maybe Mark or Jeff or Rich can shed some light on why that got put in there that way.
No, I think I'll have to track that one down through Dave Young and make sure I know the history of that change. It just doesn't, it wasn't, other than moving the properties to the addendum and some transition items to the addendum, the procurement issue with Harwich, the budget issue with Harwich, and the lost revenue issue with Yarmouth. That was the extent of the changes, I believe. So,
It was pretty clear to me that this was KP Law's edition, so I think it's imperative that we read it very carefully.
okay.
Yeah, we'll get back and find out the genesis of that conversation was, how that got in there. I mean, ultimately, it would be the commission's decision if it were to be brought to fruition to enter into an agreement, however they want it as it relates, but nobody, and again, I don't remember this ever being decided, ever, at this point.
And perhaps it was highlighted because it hadn't been decided. It was up for discussion, but it just was, those appendix were new documents, and so I was reading it, and because it was in yellow, it jumped out at me. I was just trying to figure out the question behind, so.
Absolutely. So there's no vote or anything needed. I just wanted to make sure that over the next couple of weeks, you have a chance to read through it. There's obviously going to be another opportunity to talk to the bigger group about, what we should do with this. It seems like everybody has been in concurrence to move as many of the articles off to the fall as possible. There's also the warrant, a copy of the draft warrant Rich prepared. We don't need to have a decision on those articles as it relates. They're more for just illustrative purposes now of what we think are the ones that are most important to cover in an upcoming town meeting to keep the town running. We can certainly have that up as a meeting item next week. But probably shortly thereafter, we're going to need to get some finality on what should be included.
Okay, what I'm gonna do, Dan, right now is have Rich give a brief overview as to the revised articles that we have before us tonight versus the version of the warrant articles that we had previously. And I think they pertain to the, I think the difference is largely going to be pertaining to removing the wastewater articles and funding articles relating to wastewater and the petitioned articles, and I believe the CPC articles. So Rich, you want to?
Rich, can you talk about the lawfulness too, about our closed warrant and how we have the ability to move the petition article?
We, if I could, Phil Cadet contacted the 3 petitioners and they're fine with that. So what we would need to do, I believe, is to have the moderator make that mention on the floor and have it tabled to the next fall meeting.
But we're not technically removing them from the warrant.
Yeah, so they'd kind of be like
Definitely postponed.
Postponed, if you will. Yeah.
I didn't mean to
Unless
say
somebody-
they'd be removed from the warrant. I'm saying they removed from the list that we had previously.
But that doesn't mean that somebody at town meeting floor has to allow for that to happen. If there's people there that want to have the conversation, we have to allow it. Isn't that correct? I mean, what we decide now is if it's printed on the warrant, somebody can get up and move to postpone these articles, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the meeting itself will want that. So we're assuming, and we need to be prepared is my point.
Okay. Well, I did take the effort to look what a warrant might look like if it were pared down. Again, the will of town meeting or the moderator or this board could change that, but as far as a bare bones warrant looks like, contemplating keeping an Article 1 for FY20 results, which we'll have to get back to you on as to what that need might be, but we're holding that open. Article 2, which is the operating budget, hasn't been updated from the last presentation yet, pending following through of tonight's discussion. But there are substantial changes past that, and as Chairman Stone indicated, the CPC will need to vote ultimately if they'd like to postpone their articles. Right now, as I understand it, the administrative article would have to continue, and there's some level of importance to the housing article to continue. So those are in the warrant. The petitions at this point have been removed. The capital budget is presented, but subject to the freeze. But we did eliminate capital budget items from non-general fund sources. So anything from the not wastewater, sanitation fund, and the water fund, and Gulf retained earnings, anything voted from those were removed. The operating budgets, however, obviously remain for each of those funds. The free cash article was removed, and there were, to the extent there were items to be remaining in there, the amounts from FEMA and vehicle repairs that seem to be important to maintain were added right here under the capital budget article as additional requests. And so that amount has changed. All the DHY articles have been removed. I should say not just DHY, wastewater articles have been removed. DHY considering deferral to the fall on those issues, with one exception. Article 11, we're contemplating that perhaps we should continue with this article to coordinate roadway monies to have savings on the overall plan, but also to position ourselves if there is some sort of stimulus funding available for projects. This gets us closer to being shovel ready and to be able to take advantage of that type of thing. It's an authorization. Just because you authorize it doesn't mean that we are necessarily going to spend it, but it does give us the funding authorization through a bond. Article 12 seemed innocuous enough to, that's just a housekeeping that we could continue on. And at the end, there were two other articles regarding land disposition that just were timely. The first had to do with the lease agreement for the Ocean Club, and Article 16 had to do with our ongoing work for the MVP Action Grant, where we're designing solar and battery facilities that we contemplate will be funded by a $2 million implementation grant. However, we do need to have the ability to lease those parcels for solar PV development for up to 30 years in order to do that, and that requires a town meeting vote. And that's it. That pairs the audit, pairs it down to about 16 articles.
So I guess I'm confused. The petition articles don't need to stay on the warrant? We can remove them?
You bring up a good point, and perhaps they still do need to be there. I'll have to get some clarification on that. I'm not, and I'll have to check with Phil if perhaps, if they're withdrawing them, perhaps so we can remove them.
If they withdraw them before the warrant, I would think it would be different, but
Right.
I'm not sure if they've gotten the requisite signatures. I think we're forced to place it on the warrant. We can ask for the people to consider postponing it.
Yeah. So here's what we're gonna do. We wanted to see if you were in agreement with the articles that were in front of you. If it is such that we can't pull those off, we'll print the warrant with them on. But the town council is gonna give us an opinion on that, on what it can. We never published the warrant. We had already had issued a postponement. So if it had been published by the constable and notified, it would have been a different story. So we're in this kind of gray area. But if that's the case, what we can do is go back to the original warrant as it was numbered, and we'll just highlight the articles for that we talked about tonight, and maybe use gray shading to gray shade those so that there isn't any confusion as to, though it's still there, they're not going to be up for consideration necessarily. But that'll all come together over the next week or so.
So we closed the warrant, though. I guess my clarification really is in the legality of us.
Right.
Because we postponed the date, does that open up our window to reevaluate the articles, or do we have to print them all?
So with the exception of the petitioned articles, I believe that it's up to the board to decide what's going to go through before you get to the point where you publish the warrant. I just got to clarify that through town council. The petitioners have generated the requisite signatures to qualify. And that definitely might be an issue that might have to appear, but they have agreed that they could move those to the fall, and they're fine with that. We'll work out those details before next week's meeting.
Okay.
All good points, though.
Okay, good. All right, anyone have any other questions or comments on the warrant articles before we move forward to the next item?
Well, the only thing I have, thinking about the CPC, they were postponing their decision on what they were going to recommend and support for articles based on the decision from the people on whether they wanted to do the reduction in the transfer. So if we don't put the article on for the funds to be reallocated, or the exemption of the first 100,000 is, I guess, what I'm getting at. That first 100,000, that was going to impact them and their budget, and it was also going to give us some front-loaded money that we needed. I understand it's a long, complex issue, but I'm not sure how much time in a town meeting it would take, but I think if we put that vote off, that's going to further prevent the CPC from knowing what they're going to recommend in the fall, because they were waiting for this in the ATM to decide what they were going to do in the fall. So,
Well, if you did the exemption vote,
It needed a
in the
ballot question.
fall, it'd be effective for the next fiscal year. So this year would be FY21 would be status quo. The exemption would be effective, and the potential infrastructure fund would be effective in FY22. We're also deferring the discussion on DHY and moving forward on that. So perhaps the need for funding shifts a year as well. So.
okay.
All right, next item, Yankee Village Conservation Restriction.
I think on this one, Karen Green is on the meeting. And this is the final piece as it relates to that parcel that we had acquired and had a demolition recently. So Karen, if you're there, hello.
Here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Karen.
You have in your packet a memo from me with a copy of the conservation restriction that we are proposing the Board of Selectmen sign. This is kind of, you know, for lack of a better word, it's really almost a housekeeping kind of thing. The votes have happened at town meeting. And the conservation restriction is a requirement of the Community Preservation Act funding, which was used to acquire the parcel. The conservation restriction is also a requirement of the park grant program. That's the funding from the state that we will be receiving, but not until we execute a conservation restriction and a couple of other loose ends. I do have Mark Robinson is on the meeting as well. Mark is, I think, Executive Director, I'm not sure what the title is, of the Compact of Cape Cod Conservation Trusts. So we had Mark, who is well-versed with conservation restrictions up and down Cape Cod, prepare this document. It's been reviewed by town council. And, you know, I included in the packet on page, the second page of the memo, town council actually went ahead and prepared a motion for the board, took liberty. And what I'm requesting you do is take the vote. And then I'm told by town council that we need ink signatures, which would mean a majority of the board. So at least 3 of you would need to come into town hall. The town clerk's office has a notary public who can attest to your signatures, and she would be available later this week. So,
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that the Yarmouth Board of Selectmen approve and grant a conservation restriction for a nominal consideration to the Yarmouth Conservation Trust for the property located at 275 Route 28 in the form attached hereto, in compliance with the terms of the PARC project agreement dated June 10th, 2019, between the town of Yarmouth and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, acting by and through the Secretary of the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs as authorized by Article 22 of the May 5th, 2018 annual town meeting.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. The motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to disclose publicly that I'm a member of the Yarmouth Conservation Trust. And so just to get that out there, I will be abstaining from this vote.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's take a roll call vote. Tracy,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Norm,
Aye.
I vote aye as well. So it passes by a vote of 4-0 with 1 abstention.
okay. Thank you. I can let you all know when Stephanie is going to be in the office. It's Thursday after 10 o'clock and Friday after 12 this week, if anybody's available. And if you want to email me, I'm happy to kind of let Stephanie know when you would be able to stop in to sign the original for us.
Okay, thank you, Karen.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mark.
Board and committee actions. I think you have a couple.
No,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, we have one item before that.
What is that? Oh, yeah, weights and measures. I'm sorry. IMA's and possible vote.
So,
Sorry about that.
Rich, before you go up to the screen, I had asked Richard Scaly to join the meeting. Oh, there he is. Didn't see you right in front of me. So Richard is our contact in charge of licensure in the weights and measures group over in Barnstable. And what I included in the packet was the Barnstable original request of the town to have a consideration, the original IMA from the 1999 period. Then there's 2 additional, the FY20, as Barnstable had explained to us that they were in a deficit situation. I think it's roughly $4,000 that they were looking for. I checked in with Richard today, and only Dennis and Mashpee were still under consideration to pay that. And then the last document was the IMA for 21, which town council is fine with. It went through quite a bit of legal review by Barnstable Council, Sandwich Council, our council. So it's now in a position that the lawyers are fine with, and that would establish for FY '21 the continued relationship between the two towns where Barnstable would service our weights and measures needs.
Can someone tell me what the statute is for the town's responsibility in this? My opinion has not changed. I see that the fee structure is still from 2014. We don't run our town budgets that way, putting those responsibilities on our taxpayers for fees associated with things that unfortunately the user has to pay. I know your opinion already that you feel that you're high, and I get that, but not raising your prices for 6 years is not how we conduct our fee schedule within our town. So I can't support not sharing that cost with the user. So I don't understand why our taxpayers would be responsible for that. I know that there's some legislation that probably mandates that the towns provide this service, but at the same time, the businesses are mandated to have this service provided. And I know a lot of towns cost share, but I don't understand how our taxpayers should be responsible for that. I can't support it without at least trying to share that cost with the end user. As a business, it's a cost of doing business. That's my opinion. It's been the same since we started. Nothing's changed. So I'm not going to support this. I understand you guys do a great job, but I certainly believe that cost in 6 years, 7 years now, there should be a price increase steady, because if you went up a little bit every year, it wouldn't be so dramatic for the businesses, but now the taxpayers are paying for it. So.
Well, I'm happy to answer any of the questions in terms of explanation on that as well. As I stated before, when we met back in September, this agreement is a regional approach. There are 10 towns involved in this approach. And as you stated, the fees we're the second highest in the state with regard to those fees. You have to look at this as an approach to the fact that there are fee-based services and then there are non-fee-based services as part of this. Each town is responsible for providing those services to their businesses. We service 109 businesses in Yarmouth. There are about 438 devices that we inspect and investigate for you. There are a number of investigations, inspections that we do that are not fee-based. They're violation and fine related. So there's really no income related to those items. Those fines.
The second highest expensive. Why is that? Why are you the second highest in the state?
Well, it's a regional approach, so that we provide for.
I mean, the counties, there's other counties that do it. There's a lot of regional approaches. There's got to be a reason in terms of what the benefit package, the wages, I'm not sure what it is, but something that's certainly out of our control as to why it's the second highest in the state. That's a problem.
Well, it's because we service a number of towns with a number of services that we provide regionally as an approach to the whole region on the Cape. It's not a county approach. It's a town by town agreement. As of now, I have Bourne, Brewster, Dennis, Mashpee, and Falmouth that have all signed these agreements, and we're still waiting for Harwich and Orleans and Sandwich to provide their agreements as well. We believe that it's not fair to the small businesses to raise fees where our fees are already high enough. And so we look at it in terms of a benefit to the businesses. It's a benefit to the residents as well. We do a calculation of the cost savings to the residents of each town. We provide that report to you and to the state every year as to what benefit we provide to the residents of the town. So there is a responsibility to them as well.
I know the benefits that you guys do. I know the great work you do. Unfortunately, in our town's budget, when someone provides a service, this has been our policy. I mean, this should be no different. And our policy is if the end user is using that and it costs X, Y, and Z, There's certain benefits to the town, I understand that. But to not raise fees in 7 years, I just can't, I don't understand why this isn't being shared with the businesses, even if it's high. If that's the cost to provide the service, it's the cost to provide the service. You don't need, I know we've been over this before. You don't need to answer me. I'm just.
Sorry. Yeah.
I understand your position and I'm sure it's not changed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Norm?
I guess, following on Tracy's point, if can you give us kind of an idea of what the standard fee is right now? And if there were an increase, how much that fee would go up to?
As part of your package that was provided to you, I think you have it there. It lists our fees under Mass General Laws, Chapter 98, Section 56, which is the statute that we provide the services under. It lists our scale capacities. It lists them at, for 1 to 3 scales, it's $275. For 4 or more scales, it would be $250. And then it lists a number of other fees. Each individual meter we provide inspection for is $60, 1 to 3, 4 or more is $55. The majority of our inspections have to do with our dispensers, obviously, motor fuel meters. And so we look at those fees in terms of the amount of work that we do. We also provide the billing service, the violation service, collection fees, and there are many administrative costs that go along with that as well. But the list of fees are there. If we were to look at that again, we would have to figure out a calculation as to what the CPI would be on that.
Have you done that?
We have not. Yeah, we have chosen not to do that at this time because the fee to the small business person would be quite high and costly to them.
Eric?
No, I'm all set.
Mark?
I don't have any questions now.
Does anybody want to make a motion one way or the other?
There's two, Mr. Chairman, there's 2 IMAs, one to pay what was represented as this year's assessment was for $4,032. That's the IMA for FY20. And then there's the other one that has a COLA adjustment in it that's roughly $15,000 that goes up by the CPI, I believe, per year. So I'd like to have a vote on each one of those, one way or the other.
Okay.
So the first vote you want is on the existing agreement?
Yeah, so the unbeknownst to a lot of people, I think, we were under an operating agreement that had its origins back in 1999 and essentially was effective in 2000. And in that agreement, there was language in there that at the time, the town of Barnstable could have provided an assessment to the membership towns for things that Mr. Scalia just talked about were not reimbursable as a charge for, I think it's violation inspections and some other administrative charges. And it was represented to me that in all those years, for whatever reason, those charges never came to fruition. So there had never, ever been a charge to any of the towns on that topic. So back in the fall, he had mentioned that they, there's like with us, there's an OPEB liability and all the fully benefits load. There's some capital equipment, but they were running in the Barnstable town budget. They were running a shortfall in our percentage based on our devices that they investigate represented $4,000 and $4,032. That was be our share of it. So I'd asked him that, what did the other towns in the agreement did they agree to pay their assessment if they were presented that? And to date, I don't think any of them have. So,
Correct. There's only Dennis and Mashpee are considering it as still, because with the crisis now, there's a lot of other costs, of course, that are being considered as well. So not exactly perfect timing on looking at the current year.
yeah, so
But the other towns have chosen not to do it. So
yeah, and I couldn't pay a bill due to another town without authorization. So that's why this got in front of you way back in the fall. And the second one, though, is more important, obviously, because it's a weights and measures service for fiscal 21 and beyond. And my understanding is that the Barnstable equipment needs some significant upgrades. I mean, I'm familiar with the cost of this equipment, the vehicles and the prover and all that go on with the service. And clearly, if we had to prop up our own weights and measure operation, we would be into this a lot more than the $15,000 going forward. It'd be a salaried position. There'd be a lot of equipment to purchase, a lot of ongoing annual training. But that's essentially what Barnstable wanted to do, was modernize the agreement that reflected the cost of the operation going forward and split it amongst the towns based on their number of units.
All right, so the first agreement, the fiscal 20 is you're looking for a back payment.
That's essentially it, correct.
$4,032. And you said that Dennis and Mashpee are considering it, and the other towns voted not to do that?
they do not have it in their budget to be able to do that.
But have they voted? Have they voted?
They, as I said, Bourne, Brewster, Falmouth, Dennis, and Mashpee have all voted for the fiscal year 21 budget appropriation. The others, Harwich, Orleans, and Sandwich, I'm still waiting on their boards of selectmen vote. Dennis and Mashpee are the only ones that are waiting until the end of their calculations for this fiscal year to see if they will still contribute to the fiscal year 20 budget. So I'm hopeful, but obviously times are different than they were 6 months ago.
But no other towns have voted to do that?
No other towns have.
Okay, I just want to be clear on that. Do I have a motion on the fiscal year 20 that seeks the retroactive payment? Either for or against?
I make a motion that we do not approve any additional payment.
Motion not to approve on the fiscal year 20. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. So we'll have to have a roll call. Any discussion before we go to vote? Okay, roll call vote. Tracy?
Aye.
So you're voting basically aye, not to approve, right?
The motion was to not approve.
Yeah, okay. Norm?
Aye.
Mark?
Nay.
Eric?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. So that motion not to approve passes by a vote of 4-1. So now that brings us to the 2021, I guess, the fiscal year, fiscal year 2021 agreement.
And that continues on, Richard, if I'm correct here, until such time one of the two towns wants to exit that agreement.
It would be automatically renewable each year, and on the third year, it could be renegotiated at that point. But it's a 25-year agreement, basically.
Can I ask a question about that? I'm just curious as to why a private industry wouldn't be able to provide this service. Just as if a business got it certified through a private industry, is that allowable by law?
It is not. In New Hampshire, they do allow that, but they're one of the only states that allow a private industry to do that. But according to the Division of Standards here in Massachusetts, it would not be allowed.
Now, Richard, just for the board's further expansion on that topic, it was my understanding that for towns under 5,000 people, that the state actually performs this service. Is that correct? Or a county?
So under the statute, the Division of Standards provides the service minimal to the towns that are under 5,000. And then there are other towns that they contract with and charge for those fees as well. Their fees are somewhere in the area of like $325 an hour to be able to do those services. So because of the changes with the Division of Standards, there's a new chairperson there, a new director of the Division of Standards. They are cutting back on their contracts with regards to the current towns that they're servicing right now. It's not economically feasible for them.
I know you've been listening to our conversation. I know you know the hard times that we're in. And, I think perhaps we need to write our legislators and allow this to be something that's in the private industry purview, because, it's something that it definitely benefits our residents. I understand that. We need to have checks and balances to make sure that people are selling lawfully. But there's no reason. There's a lot of scale companies out there that work with the towns and weights and measures that help to certify these scales. And I don't see any reason why our legislators shouldn't allow this to be privatized. There's no reason why this should be a town's responsibility. And, all it does is drive the cost up with, as you mentioned, we already know municipal union contracts, and it's a 40% increase to what it could be. And if we're not willing to transfer those fees and those expenses to the end user, it's a big burden to bear, and it's only going to get bigger. Because it doesn't seem to me that raising the fees is in the interest of the town of Barnstable. So we're going to be stuck with whatever that is. What's the CPI? What is it capped in this contract?
It's CPI or 2%, whichever is greater per fiscal year.
Per fiscal year. Okay. So there's not a check back in terms of 10 years from now, 5 years from now, if you're going to look at the fees.
I think it's 3 years, right, Richard?
It's every 3 years, yes.
The fees are that you look at the fees. So you've looked at the fees twice in the last since 2014, and
it's with the agreement on the 3-year agreements. They're renewed yearly, but on the 3-year mark, it would be relooked at with each town.
Okay. Well, our fees are usually associated with the actual cost of doing the service, and that's my point. So we don't transition those fees in the town of Yarmouth to the general taxpayers, except for ambulance services, perhaps. But the majority of our fees are cost associated with the actual fee that's cost to the end users.
I think if you look at it in terms of us providing a service to the town of Yarmouth is really how you should be looking at it, because would need to look at what it would cost the town, your town itself, to provide that service. And if you look at our costs, the only guaranteed fees that we can bring in Yarmouth is about $28,000. The fees, the fines and violations are about $26,000, and those are not guaranteed. Cost of equipment, trucks and equipment, certified employees who are trained to be able to do this work is very costly as well. So I think you have to look at that we as a town are providing a service to your town, not just to your businesses.
And if we had to do this,
I understand the benefit to the town, but I think Tracy's point is a valid one. I think the issue, if you make the analogy to our building inspector fees, again, all of those fees are cost justified, and all the costs are billed out. Yeah, there is a benefit to the community. Of course, we want to make sure that all our buildings are constructed to a certain standard. But that doesn't mean that we don't charge the end user a fee that is commensurate with the service. So,
but you should look at that in terms of that's internally in your town. We can cover our own costs in Barnstable, most definitely. but we're providing a service to all other 9 towns that perhaps would cost them a lot more in the end. So economically, it makes sense to be, as a region, to use the resources that we have, the certified trained people that participate in the national conference and the Northeastern and Massachusetts conferences, as well as are up to date on all the equipment and all the trainings that are needed. So you have to look at what is most economically feasible for your individual town. And we believe we provide a very economical service to each of the 10 towns that we provide the service to.
Dan, have you done an analysis if we did, I understand there's a lot of equipment involved, but what that fee would look like in terms of spreading it out?
I think I didn't look at a specific analysis. You would have to be into the position at least a full position, and then you would have to look for partners potentially, and then the equipment. But I wanted to mention the building department, if I recall correctly, the last time fees were set with those was to calibrate it to like 85% of their labor cost, I thought it was. But I'd be willing to state that we could not do this service on our own for a more cost-effective price. And then going forward with the amount of equipment that has to be purchased to do this, it's a challenge. So, I mean, if you're asking me, for $15,000 going up 2%, with the absence of having a conversation with another partner that's located geographically pretty far away from us that would want to maybe service us, like another county, and the state won't, but another county maybe, it'd be very hard to make that happen. And this is the best opportunity that's in front of us. Without, I would not want to run a weights and measures operation, and particularly in today's day and age, build it from scratch for a community our size.
Richard, how long have we had this relationship between the town of Yarmouth and the town of Barnstable?
Since 1999.
So we've been doing this for that long. And Dan,
21 years, yeah.
What would you estimate the savings annually to be, Dan? Even just a range ballpark?
Yeah, I mean, if you were to ask me with personnel costs and equipment, I mean, the capital outlay for equipment is substantial. It's just to do the testing on the fuel operation is the device for that is it's at least a 5-figure cost on that. In the labor for a very specialized technical person to do this, if we could find one out here, you're talking salary range probably 65, and then benefits on top of that. So you're into this thing well over $100,000, I think.
Yeah.
To get started.
So this would be, now you refer to it as an IGA, but is it an IGA we're approving, or is it a MOU?
It's an IMA.
It's an IMA. So it's an intermunicipal agreement.
Correct.
All right. Well, to move this along, then let me just offer a motion that I move that we approve the IMA that's proposed between the town of Yarmouth and the town of Barnstable for weights and measures services for FY21 and beyond. Dan, is that motion?
Yes.
Does that need to be revised at all? Is that?
No, that's what we needed. A motion to approve the intermunicipal agreement as proposed for FY21 and beyond.
Okay. There it is.
And that's designated in our packet as FY21 IMA final version.
Yes, that was reviewed by a number of councils, including Tallerman, reviewed it as recently as a couple weeks ago. They signed off on it.
Okay, we have a motion by Mark. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I'd like to propose an amendment that before any renewal of the contract, that the annual fees will have increased by at least 10% over the term of the first term of the contract.
Say that
So,
again.
yeah,
So-
say that again. No, go ahead. Repeat that.
What I'm proposing is that we authorize this contract, but with the proviso that no renewal will occur unless there is at least a 10% increase put into effect during the term of this contract.
Well, can I ask Richard a question? Richard, is the town of Yarmouth allowed to enter into this agreement and have our own fee schedule? Are you allowed to charge Yarmouth users a different fee schedule? Could we ask for our own fee increase? So perhaps you could provide the service, but we would be able to mitigate some of our costs?
That was considered and rejected because of the fact of the billing cycle and the billing ability of doing that would be a nightmare. We bill over 4,000 units of billing, and so it would be, we have a very specialized data system that keeps track of all of this. And so under the agreement, it would be the fee schedule that we have proposed that all the towns would have to agree to.
Norm, I'd support that amendment if we asked for a 10% increase now. And perhaps you could get the other towns to support it. I think, I mean, there's no win in this. Obviously, if we don't have it, we don't have, you've got us, because right now we haven't investigated any other options, which is unfortunate, and we have to provide a service. But at the same time,
Just to clarify, under the agreement, there's a 90-day clause in there that either party can cancel at any time. So there is a provision in there that with a 90-day notice, if you're unsatisfied with the services or don't like the services in any way, for any excuse at all, within 90 days notice, you can cancel. And that's during any period of time.
That's correct. That's under Article 3, it looks like.
Yeah.
It says either member may terminate this agreement at its sole discretion by providing 90 days written notice to the other member in accordance with paragraph 5 of this Article 3.
so what happens with Norm's motion to say the 10%? What does that mean to the other towns? Kind of like we're stuck.
The other towns have agreed to the terms that have agreed, except for the final 3 that I'm waiting on. So they've accepted the fee schedule. They have the same terms as you would be considering. So they would not be part of your motion with regards to the fee schedule. And I could not guarantee you that we would increase them by 10%. I would have to go through our town council, our legal counsel, and then our town council would have to vote on those fees as well. So, and there's no guarantee that would happen.
Yeah, I'm bothered by the fact that there's been no attempt to increase fees, and I just, I don't like the idea of our town absorbing an additional cost and having that built into with an inflation factor for the future, again, with no provision for increasing fees to the end user. I just don't think that's right.
Well, we could make.
We certainly can review the fees and look at them and present that a proposal. That's certainly always an option, and we do that on a regular basis anyways, but town council has chosen at this point, our town council has chosen not to do that. So
Well,
we certainly can review that.
We could approve this agreement and give Dan the direction to look for alternatives. In the meantime, perhaps the county or an independent person, a subcontractor, something.
You're certainly welcome to do that. And just to be clear, our services would cease on June 30th then as of this year, if the contract was not signed.
No, I don't think we have a choice. We're kind of, we don't have any alternate, we don't have any options. So perhaps we need to approve this and give our town administrator a directive to look at other options.
Sure.
Yeah, and you do have that 90-day exit provision if you wanted to exercise it for any reason. And it's reviewable every 3 years, so. There's plenty of protection there, I think. So where do we stand with the motion, Norm?
Well, no one seconded the amendment, so, you know, it just drives. Yeah.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the
IMA.
IMA for fiscal year 21, final version as presented to us in our packet. Correct?
Correct.
Right, let's have a vote. Tracy,
Reluctantly, aye, but I'm gonna vote for it on the contingency that we ask Dan to find a way to provide the service that's net neutral to our taxpayers.
okay, Norm,
Yeah, I feel the same way.
Mark,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
I vote aye as well, so that passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Brings us to board and committee actions. I think you have a few, Mark, right?
Yeah, we have just a couple of items. First is to accept the resignation of Philip Johnston from the Conservation Commission. So I'll move that we accept his resignation.
Second.
Thanks.
Yes.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye, so that's unanimous.
Yep, thank you. And then the next item would be to recommend the appointment of David Bernstein from West Yarmouth to a 3-year term on the Conservation Commission through June 2023.
Tracy,
Aye.
Norm,
How long has he been on the Conservation Commission?
David Bernstein has not been on. He's filling
he's a new appointment to fill a
He's a new
3-year
appointment.
unexpired term.
Right. So in your packet is some background on him. He has been attending some of the meetings to follow how their business is. The Conservation Commission interviewed him. I've interviewed him. So I'm recommending him for appointment.
All right. Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
And I, so
Mark, aye, and I vote aye, so that's unanimous.
thank you. The next item, the last item that I have is to reappoint Jack McCormick as the town of Yarmouth's representative to the Cape Cod Commission through June 2023.
So moved.
A second.
With love.
Right, Tracy moves it with love.
There you go.
Is your second with love too?
Admiration.
Or at
Love and
least great
admiration.
admiration.
There
Okay.
you go.
Tracy,
There you go.
Aye.
Norm,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
I vote aye too, so that's unanimous as well.
I move we approve the minutes of November 19th, 2019.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Tracy, Norm,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
I vote aye too, so those minutes are approved. November 19th, 2019. Upcoming agenda review.
So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to need a meeting next week and an executive session.
Okay,
I've also reached out to the school department. They're on board for a May 19th presentation for the new middle school project. As that, we have a building committee meeting on Thursday through teleconference, so I'll get an update then. But But they, as the board had asked for an opportunity to have the project presented, so that'll be on the 19th of May. Tugboats has to come back in front of you for an alteration of the premise that was not part of their change of manager application. So there's some alteration going on within the premise. So that'll be back in front of you.
So that's for the 5th?
The 19th. So the 5th, there's a couple of things.
Oh, I'm sorry. I see it now. Yeah. Alternate tugboats is the 19th. Okay.
Yeah, the 5th will have an executive session and then a potential vote related to personnel issues. And then there's a document circulating now that I need to get in front of you as it relates to the town taking a position on summer visitors to the town in light of COVID-19. And there's the MVP project is up there. I'm not sure if that's the design work associated with the project at Workshop Road and at Fire Station 3. As part of the grant arrangement, they need to have some public outreach activity. So they originally were going to present their 75% engineering design to the community through the Board of Selectmen's meeting. I'm not sure if that's still the plan considering the situation we have, but they are getting us in line for a $2 million construction grant. So the project is moving along.
You're gonna have something for us too on the articles, whether we can
Right.
pare down that
List.
that list of articles, or whether we have to include them and then
Postpone them.
have
Right.
motions to indefinitely postpone them. So
Yeah.
we'll revisit the articles on the 5th.
Right. And there's also the issue of calling the special election in light of Selectman Holcomb's resignation. That will have to get on the agenda as well.
Well, I thought we were gonna, I thought we were gonna have his
Right, so we can
special
couple that with
election on the 1st of
with the
September.
state primary, but you'd still have to you'd have to motion that to be added to that ballot.
We'd have to have a separate ballot, wouldn't you?
Right, yeah, so that's one of the logistical issues I was working with the clerk about what would that look like? Particularly, there's been a lot of commentating on the election sites about personal protective equipment and what poll workers need to protect themselves. And then one of the problems I think we're going to have significantly is a lot of the communities are substituting the traditional poll workers because they typically are in that high-risk demographic for this virus for full-time staff members. So I'm not sure even at this point what June 30th election looks like for us. But obviously we rely heavily on our public to man the polls and be the poll workers. So there is a lot of communication going on at the state level about how to do that safely. And I'm not sure if it's going to be a really good outcome as it relates. So
wouldn't we be in a better position though on September 1st than we would at the end of July?
well, so interestingly, and one of the statistics that was shared with us with the governor's press conference was that if the stay-at-home order was not extended to August 5th, you could count on, as some of the models show now, up to 50,000 Massachusetts fatalities by the end of the year. And that's one of the topics that the governor's staff is grappling with, that to keep the fatality total by the mathematic model under 5,000, whatever algorithm they're using has indicated that the stay-at-home order needs to be in place till mid-August. So I cannot tell you what we're going to need to do by September. I'm real concerned about what it looks like for our poll workers in June right now. But, to the best of our ability, we'll have to figure that out to pull off the election.
Rich is gonna have to revise the numbers to reflect the additional doom and gloom.
Well, they are encouraging people to the extent possible to do as much absentee balloting as you can, is to be the safest thing to do. So there's a lot to work out between now and then for sure.
Campaigning is gonna be interesting.
Yeah. Signatures too.
Signatures.
Yeah, so there'll have to be a signature period for Mr. Holcomb's seat too, so.
All right, so are we gonna address that on the 5th?
Well, it'll be a topic for discussion. We don't necessarily have to take a vote. Phil, I'll get all the deadline dates from Phil as it relates to when you have to actually place or set the dates, if you will. Even the June 30th date, we haven't set that yet. We are, like I said, we've been working with the Cape Real Estate Group there about the logistics on the site. I'm not a big fan of moving it either. But in the ability to give us enough maximum time to notify the public and plan, it is helpful to have a decision sooner rather than later on that whole topic.
What was that date he was proposing for the regular,
June 30th,
June 30?
the last day of the month, yeah. It's a Tuesday.
Oh, yeah, that's right, because town meeting was gonna be the 22nd. It was gonna be like roughly a week after that,
That's
right?
correct. Right.
Okay. Right.
And anything else that you want to put on the agenda between now and then is just let me know.
Okay, we'll go to individual items. Rather than calling everybody, I'll ask if anybody has anything.
I'd just like to
I
say,
have a couple of things, please.
Okay, we'll go to Eric.
First, I was sad to get notice of Rich's pending resignation and move to Eastham, but I wish him all the best, and he will be sorely missed. He has been a tremendous asset to the town of Yarmouth for a very long time. In the many capacities that he has had, many of the hats he's worn. So, Rich, good luck, and I wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you.
know, the beginning of the meeting got a little heated, and I didn't want to pile on, but I share Norm's frustration with all of this, and there are bigger political issues that we could debate that I don't want to debate. But Dan, at one point you said, "Tell me what you want me to do." I want you to get the golf courses open. Figure out how to do it. Find a nuance. Find a loophole. We need to get those golf courses open. It's a tremendous point of frustration and anger among the residents. Personal accountability has been stripped from us during this entire episode. And, people, it seems as though people, the powers that be don't want to trust people to be able to take care of themselves. So, that's really all I have to say. Find a way to do it.
Anyone else?
I just like to, I'd like to add on that. I think there have to be ways to do it. Even if we're giving away golf for a couple of weeks, we're asking for contributions. I don't know, but there's got to be a way. And I'm not gonna get into lengthy discussions at this point, but I would like to return to another point with regard to the projections for 2021. And I know that there's difficulty in asking people for pay reductions or proposing layoffs, and I understand the need to have as much loyalty to our employees as we can, because certainly there are many people in addition to our public safety employees that are rendering fair services to our town. Nonetheless, we've had situations where our unions have taken advantage of our town and of our taxpayers. And we've had unions that have dragged their feet with regard to improvements in productivity, reductions in overtime. And, I think it's time for our board to step up and protect our taxpayers. And I'm not suggesting anything radical, but I think it's important that it's our taxpayers first. And we need to remember that. That's all I have to say.
Mark or Tracy?
So I just want to echo Eric's questions or comments, I should say, about Rich. However, we have a few more meetings, I think, with Rich before he exits. And, perhaps something will change his mind.
Yeah, let me just also weigh in on the Rich decision. He's truly proven himself to be an incredible leader within the town. I've watched him grow. I've watched all the different jobs that he's done, and it's just been incredible to see the level of dedication and energy and diligence that he brings to the job. I remember when I was in Brewster for a brief stint doing some work over there, and Rich reached out to me one day and said, "Hey, listen, if you need some help with something, don't be shy, give me a call." So I took him up on it, and he was able to help me get a peer review done on a financial forecast that I had worked on. And he's told me, as we've talked about this, that he's not that far away. He's around the corner. And I know as one selectman, I will not be shy about calling on him. He made the offer to me that if I needed him or we needed him, he'd be there. And I've taken him up on it in the past, and he's delivered in spades in the past. So, Rich, yeah, we're definitely going to miss you big time. You're like the cleanup hitter in the lineup here, and I don't know how we're going to fill the hole. I really don't, but we'll have to figure something out. But in the meantime, to know that you're not that far away, and that we can call on you when we need you, it certainly provides at least a little bit of satisfaction to this selectman, knowing that we can still reach out to you. And I know, like I said, you've been there before, and I know we can count on you if we need you in the future. So, you deserve a better quality of life. You deserve more time with your kids. You deserve all the good things that can come out of being in Eastham. You got a wonderful town that you're going to. I know a lot of the folks there, and I wish you nothing but the best. So,
well, I gotta say something about that. That kind of bothers me. If Eastham, if Yarmouth isn't the quality of life that he needs, then we need to look at that and figure out what Eastham is doing differently than what we're doing, because we're losing a lot of quality people, and that's really unfortunate for us. And so, to whatever the extent is, perhaps you're willing to share that.
I've got a list here if you want.
Perhaps it's the point that you're acting, and maybe we need to do something about that if it would change your mind. But I agree with you, Mark, when you say he deserves good quality of life. I just think that we should strive to make sure that our employees have that quality of life in Yarmouth as well. So, if there are things that you could recommend on the side to any of us to talk about what, was the impotence of your decision, I'd love to hear it so we can try to make things better for any of our employees.
Yep. Well, I'm certainly going to be available to the town if you need me. So I'm happy to follow.
I'm really trying here. What can we do? All right. Thank you.
Drop the acting designation.
I'll make a motion. We appoint him assistant town administrator. Can we do that?
No.
Will that matter?
I think that's Dan's appointment, but I think we can certainly recommend it as of right now. Sure.
It's not on the agenda.
We can take a
Can
look.
we put that on next week?
Sure.
There you go. Make your appointment. So you leave here as a fully fledged assistant.
That's not where I was going with this. project.
Okay. I hear you. Whatever. Listen, I've tried. I've been trying. So
All I will say is that I agree with everybody, what everybody else said. I don't want to be redundant or repetitive. Rich has been a great asset to Yarmouth, and I'm not so sure that he's replaceable. I wouldn't say that about most people, but I will say that about Rich. He's an incredibly talented, dedicated, personable individual who's made great contributions to the town of Yarmouth. And I think we're very indebted to him for everything that he's done for the town. So we should leave him alone, at least for tonight. We'll pick up on this next meeting.
He loves the spotlight. I know it. I don't think we voted on the consent agenda, so I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, Tracy,
Aye.
Norm,
Aye.
Mark,
aye.
Eric.
Aye.
I vote aye as well, so that passes unanimously. Town administrator updates.
You've got them all.
Okay, nothing further. We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No, we'll go. You can go. Tracy.
Aye.
Norm,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Eric.
Nay.
I vote aye too. We're adjourned. Thank you.